All right, everybody, welcome to the I Disagree podcast. You know, I can honestly say the reason why we've named it I Disagree is because it's two words I believe that have not only changed my life, but we all wouldn't be sitting here if we didn't say I disagree. And here's basically what we stand for. In the past 3 years, there has been more disagreements, controversies, opinions, ideas, failed expectations, character reveals, surprises, disappointments, lies, beliefs, assumptions, and bullshit than ever before. Here we go. You guys ready for the first one? Hey, thanks for joining us on our I Disagree podcast. As the intro says, I love being here because those two words have made a massive difference in my life. Actually, if I didn't say those words as a teenager, and in my 20s and my 30s and now 40s, we wouldn't be sitting here today. So I'm excited to actually share some great thoughts with you. And what we're going to do is we're going to go around the room, and we're going to start because here's what happens. I want to know who you are. Tell us a little something about yourself. Also want to know your age, married, stuff like that. Yes, you women have to tell us your age and everything and stuff like that. So let them know if you're married, kids, and we'll hear about what you do for a career, just some really cool things about you. So we'll go around this way. And of course, obviously everybody knows my two wonderful co-hosts, Ross and Dana, and stuff like that. So great having you guys here as always. Great for the playing week with you guys and everything. So we're going to go around the room. So Jamie, let's start with you.
I am Jamie Berkey. I'm 42. I'm proud to be 42. I'm not one of those women that don't like their age. I have two children, married for 15 years. I am a proud stay-at-home mom that is in the network marketing industry for the past 10 years.
My name is Erin Welton. I am 47 years old, married for 25 years, 3 daughters, adult daughters, so whole new ball game, and a soon-to-be son-in-law.
Yes.
I am Ross Skorzewski, was married 25 years, now divorced. Boy, I know my married years more than I know my divorce years. Go figure. I think it's coming up 4, whatever it is. But yeah, single, not ready to mingle. And I have 2 children. I have an 18-year-old son who's ready to go off and join the Marines here, hopefully in the next month. And then also have a 12-year-old daughter who is going on 16, 17.
I was going to say.
Former pastor, construction, framer, now here as VP of real estate at the Wellness Way.
I'm supposed to go around the room and not disagree with anybody yet, but I disagree. Ross is ready to mingle. Please come visit us at 2525 West Mason Street and stuff like that.
So glad that we can agree to disagree. And guess what? You can try all you want, but you will not succeed. Neither will you. Good luck in your dating escapades.
Dana has whole plan for this.
I do have a whole plan for this. My name is Dana Dilling. I am 34. I've been married for 9 years. I have 2 boys that are 6 and almost 8. My voice will continue to go tonight because I have a cold, so sorry about that to everybody who is watching. But I'm a clinical nutritionist. I actually went to school for accounting. I was a CPA for 10 years. I worked on taxes and decided that wasn't for me anymore, so I did a nice big career switch. And now I also co-host this podcast, and I make dating and relationship advice content for men who are looking for it called Dana Disagrees on YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram.
I'm not looking.
You should be.
Would you like to give him some dating advice?
Yeah, no.
Well, my name is James Thornton. I go by James Thorne. Father of 5, 3 adult children, 1 son, 4 daughters. 16-year-old, 14-year-old, still at home. And then I have 28-year-old son, 27-year-old daughter, 25-year-old daughter. I'm tired.
You earned the tired.
Yeah, but did I say I'm 49?
Yes.
I'm 49, yeah. Okay. I'll be 50 in next week Friday.
Hey.
Oh, congrats.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
Like Jamie, I'm happy to be getting to this age because a lot of my friends didn't make it.
Mm-hmm. No.
And still losing friends today kind of rapidly. It's kind of weird, but yeah, that's it for me.
Thanks. I'm Brent Eisberner. I am 39 years old, so apparently I'm the young one here.
Hey.
Dana.
I'm sorry, Dana. I meant as
Youngest guy here.
I meant as a guest. All right. Anyway, I was in the Marine Corps for a long time, which is why I'm not good at math.
Semper
You
Fi.
know the difference. After the Marine Corps, I went to law school, started a law firm. I am married. We are going to be on our 15-year wedding anniversary in April
Congrats.
of next year, so that's going to be fun. And let me see, 2 kids. My son is 9. My daughter is 5. And they're a handful, but I love it. And that's me.
Now what do you do for a
Awesome.
living?
Oh, I'm an attorney now.
So there we
sorry.
go. I thought that was very important.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, no, I always tell people when they ask what I do, always say, well, I was in the Marine Corps for a long time.
Right.
Now I'm an attorney because everybody hates attorneys until you need one, and
Yes.
that's how it is.
It's funny how you balance it out.
Yeah.
You talk about Marine, like, and then Laura, his hand's like, well, we could at least catch you in the middle and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But I think actually after we're done with this podcast today, though, they're going to like you a lot once they found out our history together and stuff like that. So, yeah, it's going to be quite fun. So, no. Well, welcome, everybody. So, remember, let me set the premises for it. This podcast came about, actually, I've always said to myself, I never thought I'd do a podcast. And Ross and I had a very successful show, and we developed more shows that way. Then Dana came along. Do you understand? And I said, you know something? I think it's time to put together an amazing podcast, and we've done it. And the reason why, and I always love in the premise of, is we were sitting around, we were just throwing some things out, and we said these words, and they stick today. It says, in the past 3 years, there has been more disagreements, controversies, opinions, ideas, failed expectations, character reveals, surprises, disappointments, lies, beliefs, assumptions, and bullshit than ever before. So our purpose, like we do before, is to correlate all of our different perspectives on topics that relate to what I believe is 4 really important things that I believe that people need to talk about. Because, we've heard this before, and you guys can let me know, because it seems like every audience that we had the first couple shows, they've all been told this. It's like, if you're around family and Christmas, don't talk about politics and religion. And see, everybody's like, yeah, you hear that statement all the time, but I think that's misleading to most people, because how are you supposed to talk about some very important things without having some disagreements? And sometimes you're going to find out when you disagree with somebody, you may change your thoughts, or you may get somebody else to change their thoughts based on if you can articulate. And that's our thing today, as I make some bold statements. And so that's why we're going to talk about health, men and women, politics, and religion. As I go around the room, just understand is we're first going to ask you I'm going to make a very bold statement with stuff that I believe. And I'm not saying that my belief couldn't change. I'm just saying I'm going to put it out there, and they're going to let me know if you agree or disagree. But I want you to be able to articulate why. Because I've always said this. I think the reason why I love and I wanted to do the show so much after we started talking is we were talking about young kids one day, and we're like, it's really funny if you think of it this way. I want you guys to think of this. Is everyone here has kids, okay? And if you think of it this way, and my nephew, Brandon, has a daughter who's going to be, she's 2, okay? And it's kind of funny. And so she's learning to talk and everything. But do you ever notice what happens to a 2-year-old when they can't express what they're trying to get out? What do they do?
They get upset.
They upset and they cry and stuff, because once again, it doesn't mean that they can't articulate and talk about it just so they get all emotional. Well, that's okay when you're 2. That's a little bit acceptable when you're 12, but not when you're 22 and 32 and 42 and 52. And I see it and see what happens is, so a lot of people have beliefs on health, men and women, politics, and religion, and they can't articulate and explain it. And so what do? They cry. You say, and sometimes you just cry to a politician that promises something, and they're going to make everybody else believe. And I said, Brent, we're going to get a lot of that today and stuff like that. So I'm going to make a statement, and here's what happens. We're going to do a little different than the first shows. I want to do this, because we found out that even just having the first couple of podcasts, that when we had a person agree or disagree and explain why, by the time the last person was done, sometimes they change their thoughts. And we don't want people to change their thoughts based on what everybody says. We want to see what they really
At least
agree.
not your initial thought.
Yeah.
We don't want it to be reframed.
Yes. So we're going to go around the room, and I'm going to make a couple. So we got some statements we're going to talk about that way. Then, of course, it's going to move into many topics on that. And remember, it's free reign to agree and disagree and say what you want. But please do me a favor. No matter if you agree or disagree with the statement, I'd like you to first agree and disagree, and then we'll go back around, and then we'll talk about, okay, articulate why you agree or why you disagree that way. And even if it's, I just believe this, Sam, I can handle that. Just be able to articulate there. So here we go. So here's my thing that I think is so important, because we've been talking a lot about men and women and stuff a lot, and you've been seeing, and this ties into both politics, religion. I watched a pastor the other day say these last 2 words, and I kind of almost spit my coffee out, because I was like, I couldn't believe it came out of their mouth. But here's what happens. And here's my statement, because it seems like, especially in our current world today, and in that men are kind of getting shit on like crazy. Do you know what I'm saying? And it's like anything masculine today is just, is like the most horrible thing. And so I have a statement, and we're going to see what everybody says. Agree or disagree. And Jamie, we're going to start with you. We're going to go around, and then we're going to come back to you, Jamie. And you're going to be the first one to articulate if you agree and disagree. But here's what happens to me, and I take this stance very strongly. There is no such thing as toxic masculinity?
Agreed.
Okay, so let's agree or disagree. So, and then you're gonna notice that some of us are taking notes because we like to learn and we like to take stats and we like to do things that way. So I said, so I want you to think this way: is there's no such thing as toxic masculinity. And Jamie, you said you agree. What about Aaron?
I believe that there are toxic people, but
Wait, nope,
Nope.
disagree
You
or
don't,
disagree.
you don't get to. You don't get to do that.
You're gonna say
Yet.
agree or disagree. We're gonna come around and be able to articulate in a second.
toxic masculinity. I agree.
There is no such thing as toxic masculinity. I disagree.
I agree.
I disagree.
I agree.
Okay, boy, it's gonna be a fun topic now. It's gonna be great. So we have some that disagree, some that agree. And the one thing I like about this way, now here's one thing, guys. I want you to articulate, and Jamie, I want you. Remember, you got as much time as you want, and if you guys want to ask her questions or fire some things off air, you're more than welcome to, because you might want to learn. You might learn something about Jamie. You might something may pop in your head. So this is a discussion for everybody to be able to agree or disagree. So Jamie, why would you agree with me in saying there is no such thing as toxic masculinity?
Well, as I'm like thinking about it, I agree and disagree because I'm kind of in the middle, because I think there can be toxic masculinity because some guys can take it too far where they're overbearing and aggressive, and then they start belittling other men who are not as aggressive as them, therefore creating a toxic environment for other men not to grow. Now, I think where the feminist kind of movement came in and push these men to the corner, and you have these overbearing women telling men, do this, do this, do this, therefore belittling the men, and them creating the story that masculinity is toxic, therefore blah, 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 blah. I think I'm kind of in the middle. I think men do it to other men, and I think women do it to men.
With the men doing it to other men, do you like what's the healthy versus unhealthy boundary with that then? Because I get how it can be unhealthy, and that's kind of what you're speaking to, but also men, they're supposed to push other men.
Oh, absolutely. But I think I'm speaking from a woman, and I was raised with all boys, right? So I'm a lot harder than most girls, where most girls are feminine and they're soft, whereas I'm not. I think because I would watch my brothers kind of push each other. My brothers would push me too, because I would never be the bold person that I am if it wasn't for my brothers. Yeah. Whereas they were toxic in their own kind of belittling thing, and I think it's a good thing, and it kind of can be a defeating thing, where I think a man can like grab another man and they can walk together through this thing and be like, dude, you are not pulling your weight in this, in this life together. You need to own up to, like, if you had sex with that woman, you have to stay. You can't just walk away. That's reality. You shouldn't have played around and then let another kid out there trying to figure out the way of the world. I think it's a fine line where a man can be so aggressive on another man where they're just taking out father issues on other men, where they have a lot of trauma that they have towards men in general, and they're just acting out in general. So I'm not articulating that as best as I would like. I guess it depends on the men. I think men have their own trauma that they bring a lot of times if they don't have healthy confrontation. Like, I wasn't trained in me to have healthy confrontation. I had to learn that. Whereas I think nowadays we have these men that challenge each other. That's why I really like the military. Like, you have to challenge each other. You have to pick each other up. You have to walk alongside of one another. You can't sit there and be like, you suck, you suck, you suck. I have daddy issues. So I would like to see more men challenge one another, but also like, hey, let me kind of train you up.
Sure.
So, Brent, got a question for you. So, obviously being in the military, and let's say you have somebody in your platoon not living up and stuff like that. Do you want to go to battle with them?
No.
So how about you can challenge them, encourage them, and let me ask you a question. Being a lawyer, especially what we've been through the last 3 years, we're going to get into. Do you need people that are encouraged or challenged, or need people to step up and let them know maybe they suck? What does the military do?
Well, I was going to say my perspective might be different on this, but
Exactly.
in the military, I mean, you're trained for deployments. Now I understand we're kind of post-war era military, but when I was in Afghanistan was really ramping up. Iraq was kind of on the downside. But we had Marines, and I was in the combat arms unit, so it was all male Marines that couldn't pull their weight. And quite frankly, they're a liability on everybody else in the platoon. And the way the way we fixed that was you rode that person pretty hard to make them a better man.
So let me ask you a question. Is there people that then gave up and broke?
I would say no, because the ones that couldn't hack it, the saying was, "Can't hack it, gotta pack it."
Yeah, but that's saying so they broke.
Well, no,
So let me ask you a question. So let me ask you a question, but I want to run with this because I want to think about it, because this is the difference between the way men and women are going to look at it. Because Jamie, I'm going to have you define belittling. Here's what happens. Did it make your platoon better, stronger to go into war, to go everything that way because you pushed them so hard that they broke?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, everybody has a breaking point at the end, but the thing is, sorry, and I took your question as to break. I'll never forget. I had a Marine who, in my opinion, failed at being a man in all aspects of just taking responsibility, being physically fit, just everything. And we got him kicked out of the Marine Corps. And when I say we, it's my chain of command.
Now, let me ask you a question. So let's say that Marine now went to his mama, or went to a compassionate, empathetic women, which are women by nature are supposed to be that way, and complained to them. What do you think they would call that?
Well, his mom actually gave me a phone call.
Thank you.
So
that's why. So let James, let's come back to you. And I love, and once again, and I love all your answers and stuff like that. But I want you to think about this. Define belittling.
No, I understand where you're coming from when you state that, because in that situation you have to have that. There's no middle ground. Like, you have to have that aggression. Like, you got to be like, dude, pick up your weight or I'm gonna die.
So what's the difference in real life when it comes to being a good husband,
but I
a
think
good man, a good person in general?
But I think where I see the toxic masculinity is the weak men. I think they're toxic themselves. That's what I mean.
Well, so it wouldn't be masculinity, because what you just be.
But it's
weakness.
masculine energy.
Define that.
Because they're the men. So let's say you're a man and you're raised in a household full of women, and you're more feminine.
Male.
I think. Yes.
No, it's 100% male.
Yep.
Yes. But he has toxic tendencies.
Right, but that's not masculinity, though. So what you're
but-
saying
no,
is you're
no,
classifying.
I understand.
Here,
but
let's
I agree.
let's get back to this idea of agreeing or disagreeing that there is no such thing as toxic masculinity, because now we're kind of spinning up. Because I think my disagreement in this is that I believe if we are looking at the true traits of authentic masculinity, when one is actually walking in that, it should not be toxic. My disagreement that there is no such thing as toxic masculinity is in this. What we have is a culture that, yes, has over-feminized and has really demeaned what it means to walk out authentically in these masculine traits. What we also have is a culture that hyper-fixates on alpha, hyper-fixate on these very dominant aspects of masculinity, and we see this through social media, and these are the things that all of a sudden get, you got to be masculine, you got to be the alpha male, and then men by default then start adapting to these and just pendulum swing from one posture, which we would say is possibly feminine, right, quiet, behind the scenes, no voice, weak-willed man, whatever that is, and they adapt to this new concept of a Tate or a Rogan, and they try to be these things, and therefore create collateral damage because they don't understand what it is that they are trying to undo in themselves. And in this quest for masculinity, it creates a wake of actual bullshit that they have to undo because there is collateral damage. You just can't all of a sudden become this masculine, I'm an alpha now. Really? But look, show me the fruit of what your masculinity is actually producing. It's not producing fruit. It's actually creating more harm than it is good. To me, that's
But what's
toxic.
harm? What's your harm? What's the harm?
What's the harm? The harm is in relationships. When you have a husband or a man who all of a sudden is probably actually moving more towards his maybe feminine, because let's say the role reversal in the home. You have a woman who's adapting to more of her masculine traits because he's not stepping up and actually walking out in his masculine traits. All of a sudden he comes in and steamrolls, puts his foot down and starts screaming, this is how it's going to be. It's going to be an immediate disruption to that relationship. I'm not saying that masculinity as a whole is a bad thing, but I don't think the pendulum swings from being feminine to all of a sudden now I'm masculine, hear me roar, that's going to have a productive outcome. I think it becomes, unless it's wielded properly and understood, it is definitely toxic.
I don't know. Your pay went up dramatically because of something you just described.
This isn't
over the last
this
year.
This has nothing.
Pendulum
I know,
swing
but this
and
has.
stuff of that.
I disagree. It has nothing to do.
No, but
with,
let me finish.
Yeah, because
here's
you're equating it to pay.
It's the same. Well, everything in your life got better, and so what happens this. So if you think of it this way, because you can have, as we talk about, boss bitches, and for example, over masculine trait, as you call it, women that way, stepping in and trying to take those roles, those things, and one of the best things to do is clean the slate, get rid of it. Because if you look at it this way, it's been it's either a death by 1,000 cuts, or you can take the healing and go on it right away. And so the idea is this. So the big pendulum swing, I think here's what happens. I would think there needs to be a pendulum swing. Divorce is all-time high. Men suicides all-time high. All things going on. So therefore, it's like, I would say, I think we need a big pendulum swing on everything that way. So I think that coming in and saying, hey, this is the way it's going to be. I can tell you, everybody, this company alone got better that way. Got rid of those things and say Alpha going, hey,
but
listen.
you're also the president and CEO and founder, so you're able to come in. My point in this is not saying that masculinity that there's something inherently wrong about it. I'm saying that the toxicity comes when people try to be something at the flip of a dime that they're not, and they don't know how to wield it. It actually causes more damage than it does good. To me, when we're talking about relationships, when we're talking about parents, I'm not talking about the military. Completely different environment. I hope that my son gets some black and white accountability, and that someone, goes up to him and holds him to a higher standard based on what he's bringing to the table, because he's not meant to be some rogue individual. He's there to serve as a part of a unit. He's to carry his weight. Mm-hmm. So therefore, they should get up in his face. But again, I look at culture, and I see culture right now to have an automatic pendulum swing to these men who try to be an Andrew Tate when they have no foundation or awareness or understanding on how to actually walk that out, and automatically, this is who I am. Show me.
Well, but that also starts every journey
toxic.
takes it one step. So I'd rather have a man turn his life around and say, I'm moving this direction, and get in or get out than anything else. It's like everybody's trying to hamper a person trying to move it in a masculine way, especially the women of today. And because generally, you said trying to be masculine is looked at as a bad thing. So, Aaron.
Okay. So, I'm a word nerd.
Yes.
So I come back down to definitions, right?
Exactly.
Same. So, toxic, right? What do we define as toxic? And we have to put together toxic and masculinity.
Yep.
Or are we looking at toxic and generally people, right? In the past, I've heard you define masculinity and the things that build masculinity being the 3 M's, right? Mind, muscle, and money. And for a man to truly embrace, I know that sounds feminine, but I'm a girl, okay? His masculinity is in those three areas, similar to a woman in the 3 S's that you've talked about before, okay? So if they are seen as a toxic person, whether male or female, that simply happens because they're not operating strictly within their masculinity or their femininity, but quite possibly a third toxicity. They just happen to be male, so therefore it's defined as toxic masculinity. I remember when we lived in Madison in the late 90s, and my husband was a white, middle-class Christian male. His very existence was offensive to people because of this whole concept of toxic masculinity. The thought behind the fact that that is toxic masculinity is toxic. And that's not derived from a male perspective. That's put on them from a toxic culture
Yeah.
versus a toxic male.
Dana, what you got?
No, go ahead, Ross.
Well, I was going to
He had
say,
something.
do you think, so when we look at this concept of toxic masculinity, do you think that this is something that is gender specific?
No.
No, because bad behavior is bad behavior if you're a male
No,
or
I'm
female.
saying
No, but-
masculinity.
yeah.
I'm talking about masculinity because we see a lot of women
Yeah.
who are operating in a masculine posture.
And, guess what
Because
happens?
Everybody's
but
okay
because
with
the
it.
men have defaulted to the feminine nature. So what you're seeing are women who are operating out of a masculine posture, which has become toxic. So I think
To them.
to the men, because it's neutering the masculinity in the man. So again, when I look at this concept of toxic masculinity, I don't necessarily see it as gender specific. I look to what is producing life, what is bearing fruit.
It's called sex. That's produces
But
life.
that's where I'm taking this. I look at it from all aspects, and I know we're looking at men, and we talk, because of masculinity, but it's a trait that we're seeing completely role reversal in society today,
Right.
and that's what the problem is.
Well, because what happens in society is degrading. Because the easiest way to have a slave mindset is actually destroy masculinity. Because here's what happens: this. Why do you think everybody complied during the mass? Because real men would never put up with that stuff. They wouldn't put up with it. Because here's what happens: this. Think of it this way: a piece of paper that says, "Here's a mandate. You have to give it power." And if you can take away, and by nature, women aren't supposed to be rebellious, men are. And what happens, and that's how you go against tyranny. And so therefore, it's like anything that comes along that tells a man they're supposed to do something that's against their values and everything that way. If you can teach them, be quiet, do these things, fall in line, stuff like that. It's like, hey, listen, you've now done that. Why do you think I was so disappointed? Why do you think the pandemic even existed? Because if men were standing up and going no, like we did, you know what I'm saying, it would have ended tomorrow. Do you saying it ends tomorrow? But if you can take those traits of masculinity, which are great and virtuous, just like the traits of femininity are great and virtuous in their own right, and have them, displayed, because I mean it's very sincerely. I don't care how masculine, and I fired a ton of over masculine bitches out of this company over last year. Gone. And the company got 10 times better. Do you know what I'm saying? Because you know why? Women can try to act masculine as they want. The minute a real man, masculine man walks in the room, that woman has no power. Zero. When it comes to as far as masculinity. As far as femininity, you can cook and clean and be nice and compassionate to everybody. And if a real feminine woman comes in, guess what happens? Your feminine traits from a guy don't mean shit when a real woman walks in the door and stuff like that.
Well, I think what really happened is the 1960s with the feminist movement. Is we had this clashing of women that wanted to get their power. They got jobs, and then there was like my body, my choice, and it just snowballed into what's happening right now. Right, the government divided the black male from the from the family on purpose, created funneling into the government, and it was division after division. And we can sit there and we can be like, you men need to stand up, but it was conditioned in us.
Correct.
I was raised by a single mom with 5 different dads with 5 different kids. I didn't have any man sitting and guiding me, so I looked to the world. Therefore, I took on that masculine energy because I was fighting for my life.
You had to.
And where the blame falls is on the women. Because shame you, and shame me for belittling our husbands into believing this lie that we had to take it on. It's because of us. No. In the last year, I finally understood what it was for my husband to run the household. For my kids to not run to me, Mom, is it okay? I don't know, ask Dad. Because I gave him his power back because I took it away.
Right.
Sure.
Now let's go to this side, Dave.
Yeah.
I don't know if I
Yep.
totally agree with that though, because I do think that men are the leaders, and yeah, absolutely, shame on us for belittling men, but men are the leaders, and they should be the ones to step up before we need to worry about getting back into femininity. Because if they do that, we just fall right back into it. So
But
I don't
if
know
you're
that women
fighting-
are the blame.
But we are. If we look at over history, we are to blame because that's what society has done to us. And women have taken this power on. My husband was never one like, okay, you can give me my power back. It was this natural thing that happened. He was always a male. He went to things with me. He stood up. He didn't do the mask thing. He fought for our kids. He provides for our family very well. but it was in me from the trauma from my childhood that I brought into our marriage, that I took his power away, and he didn't want to create strife in our marriage and around our kids, because if you're sitting there fighting in front of your kids, what are you showing your kids? Right now, what I'm teaching my kids is, hey, we did it wrong, but we're doing it right now, and they can learn wisdom through us in our marriage.
Sure.
Great.
What you got?
So
As you
yeah, I said I disagree because Jamie touched on a lot of the stuff that. So growing up in a black household, I grew up with a single mom. I grew up with uncles and neighbors that were always like, "Hey, you got to get the girl. You got to get the girl. You got to show her who's boss. You got to do all this, that, and the other." So for me, that was the toxic masculinity I grew up around. You look at all the black films from the 70s, high on this whole hyper image of the black man just conquering every woman that comes around. So my peers were like that too, and they're like, "Nah, man, if you don't have like 2 or 3 girls," and I'm talking elementary school, they're talking like this. And they were getting that from the adults, the uncles, the guy that sold drugs down the street, the guy that was a pimp, you know. So yeah, that's why I disagree, because I've seen it. Now, in my marriage, when I was married, yeah, it was a power struggle, because I'm like, nah, I'm not gonna be that guy that you've seen on TV that's like, go ask your mom, go ask your mom. Like, no, I'm in a role, and I'm gonna play my role, play my part to the fullest. And so we were always bumping heads over it. But now that we're divorced, I'm still there for my kids. I'm still like, my 6-year-old daughter will argue with her mom, and I say one thing, and the thing I say all the time is, I don't like your tone. I don't yell. I don't change my voice. I just say it simply, I don't like your tone. Everything stops. And it's like, that's how I was raised with my single moms. Like, you can have an opinion, but there's a time and a place for it. And it's just like, I got disciplined a lot because I never followed the time and the place for it. I just went for it.
Yeah.
But now with my own kids and seeing these images, these whole roles that we're supposed to be doing, and I'm like, nah, I'm not a kid that's stuck in the 70s. I'm not Dolomite. I'm not, you know. And that's how a lot of, like, I watch this stuff now, and I see that, and then just I look back and I'm just like, you expect me to be this hood guy, and I'm supposed to call women bitches and hoes, and I got 4 daughters. I got a granddaughter. I got a grandson, and I'm like, my son, his mom, she wanted to be a man so bad, and she's extremely bitter to this day. But my kids got to see that, and they didn't have to see that from me. But it was always, if they're talking back, I'm just like, no, I don't like your tone. Just leave it at that. So yeah, that's why I disagree.
So let's do this, and I'll pose the question to you guys. So, because love all your examples, love all your explanations that way, but I don't hear describing toxic masculinity. I all you guys hear describing toxic behavior, but can you even define what masculinity is?
Ooh, I can. That was part of my answer.
Oh, I know, but but here's my point. Because the examples. I'm gonna go there. But here's my example of this is like going, because if it's a male that gives you something that is disgusting behavior, and they just automatically core it because it's masculine that way. But what about us good men? And why is it the fact that it's like, if I'm strong in this and I tell somebody to stop the bad behavior, and if I'm a little bit more hyper in my language, I just shut up. Do you understand? And it's like, because I don't have time to sit there and explain myself. But the idea is this: it's like, and that's the thing. Like going, that's why I just can't. If you look at them, because here's what happens, ladies. If you're attracted to masculine traits, do you understand? You're not attracted to bad behavior. So, Dana, what you got? Then we'll go to Brent.
Okay, say the statement again, because now we're out of it.
That's right. Boy, we got into some pretty
know.
intense stuff right away.
It
Here we
gives me
go.
time to clear my throat.
I believe that there is no such thing as toxic masculinity.
Yep, so I agreed with that. And the reason I agreed with that is because I think that this idea of toxic masculinity is like a made-up problem. I talk about made-up problems in culture all the time because I think we're bored and we don't have enough going on that we have to make things up. But when I look at toxic masculinity, if you break down those words, kind of like how you did, toxic means poisonous or very harmful, and masculinity means characteristics associated with boys or men. So the whole term basically means that the characteristics of men are poisonous, and that's crazy. Like
Right.
that's not what this is. And I think they word it like that on purpose to demoralize men, because I think if you can demoralize men, then they become weak and they become compliant, and then their communities become weak and compliant and are easier to control. So no,
right.
I
Same
don't
mindset.
think that toxic masculinity actually exists. I think it's a term that was invented on purpose to degrade men, and I think that most of the examples that are given that are toxically masculine are just normal men behaviors, like being competitive, not wanting to lose,
Being aggressive.
yeah, being really aggressive, restraining your emotions, the idea of stoicism. Those are normal things, and we're trying to call them toxic. So I'm coming at it more from the, I think this is a made up problem. This is about the demoralization of men.
Brent, what you got?
Both of y'all kind of stole my thunder a little bit. But, no,
Share it.
So again, when I think of masculinity, right? Is it wrong for me to teach my boy to be a man? Am I going to raise my son differently than I raised my daughter? Absolutely,
You
I
betcha.
am, and that's because I want him to be a strong male that other people can rely on to raise his family right and to do his best at it. And so, you know, when James is talking about you know, you got to have 3 girls and all this stuff, and that's the attitude in grade school. Well, to me, that's not masculinity, right? That I mean,
Right.
that is just being a bad person. You're not giving yourself or committing to any sort of relationship. You're just being a bad person. And so when I hear toxic masculinity, I think, you know, they're saying having traits of being a man is bad, and I absolutely disagree with that. And I think, again, it goes back to, you know, is it wrong to teach my son to stand up for himself, to be a man, to be a provider, to take on, again, traditional gender roles that have served society for thousands of years, where the male provides and the female kind of, you know, raises the family and is more and, you know, I'm sure if you all went to my house, my kids, if they get a scrape, they come to dad, what's he say? Suck it up.
That's right.
Right? Yep. But if they go to mom, it's like much more caring. And that's because I can't be that caring, quite frankly. I wasn't raised that way. The Marine Corps, you know, training and everything like that is if you're a man, deal with your problems and move forward. But you still got to be a good person.
Right.
You know what else I think, though, with, because you said you were talking the masculinity piece. I think that maybe I wouldn't have such a problem with toxic masculinity as a term if it actually described a narrow group of men who were severely aggressive, but it doesn't. It's a very broad term that's used in our culture, and I think that that's what's really contributing to people not liking it.
And that's where I have a problem with this, because just because I say I disagree doesn't mean that I'm not in agreement with a lot of things that are talking here. The problem is that we hyper focus on the term toxic masculinity. So therefore, we're throwing the baby out with the bathwater, and we're coming against and that's not what I'm saying.
Right.
We so hyper focus on what it is that is wonderful about masculinity, but unfortunately, I don't see a lot of that. That's being celebrated and promoted. It's not what you see. You know, it's not the masculinity that I'm trying to raise in my son. If he wants, he can turn on and he can go and watch social media, and he can see a completely different version of masculinity that is different than me. We've got the Jordan Peterson that can cry at the drop of a dime, and he gets cascaded and chastised for that. And then we have the Andrew Tate over here, who has no problem speaking in a completely different fashion that I would never have my son speak.
And again,
And one is deemed more masculine than the other based on behavior or an emotion. So if we can get around the baseline, the healthy, you know, the authentic approach to him, I don't have a problem with it whatsoever.
And I think, you know, Andrew Tate, I don't see him as that. I mean, yes, he is strong. He's physically
He's
strong,
celebrated.
right? Well, society celebrates him, but is he a male role model? No. I mean, does he? And again, when it comes to masculinity, I'm looking for a chivalrous. Sorry, I can never pronounce that word.
Chivalrous.
Yeah,
Yes,
there it is.
absolutely.
Person, and Andrew Tate absolutely is not that to me. And
No.
again, I think being a man is much more than just being like, oh, look at me, I'm strong, I'm going to beat everybody here. And when it comes to, I think you said, the overbearing and aggressive people, yes, men can be overbearing, but again, the ones I think you're trying to describe, I don't believe are masculine. Like they're strong, they're loud, or they might be strong. They're loud, they're overbearing, they're aggressive. But again, that is not a definition of being that knight in shining armor that I think that defines masculine.
So, quick question for you, Brent. How many lawyers do you have?
In my law firm?
Yeah.
6.
So, would you say that your top performers are more aggressive or less aggressive?
More.
So then I just destroy your argument you just said about aggression.
Well, again, aggression is a masculine trait.
That's my point. See that, but see, you guys just demonize aggression like it's something bad. But if you look at the traits of a masculine men that wins in sport, wins in life, wins in everything. Remember they always say the nice guy finishes last. It's true. They should finish last. They really should finish last, because here's what happens. Everything that you got here. Watch this. Everybody here, every male here, you weren't the first person that decided to date your wife. You were. You saying? No, here's my point. And so so if you sat back and been the nice guy, who was taking home and banging your wife? I'm sorry, but no, these are realities we have to talk about that way, because what it's because I disagree with all you guys, because I would rather have somebody like an Andrew Tate than the majority of, give me Andrew Tates all day long compared to the world, and most of this bullshit would go away overnight. All this crap would go away. Do you see what I'm saying? And that's why I laugh. I'm sitting there going, you want the things, and you go, if you look at the traits, here, watch this. Jamie, do you want somebody stronger than you?
Of course.
More aggressive?
Yeah, of course.
Taller than you?
Yeah.
Okay, so if we start going all of these traits that women look up to and men look up to, once again, they're traits that, guess what happens is some things that you guys actually demonize. Trust me, do you understand the most successful people in business aren't people that sit back and do something. The nice guy is supposed to lose. And see what we do. It's like this. How many guys during the Super Bowl ever support or go after or support the underdog? Why? It's a trait of showing going for the weaker team. Why aren't you supporting the best? I want the best lawyer. That's why I hired you. You were super aggressive to the people where people legitimately told you that you were a horrible individual.
Correct. And so again, I think the issue is we're talking about various levels of extreme. So Andrew Tate, right? His physical abilities and his aggressiveness in his fighting career, I absolutely support.
Yeah.
But he takes that though out of the ring, and that's where I think he's just an asshole.
Right. I don't think everybody, like even like Jordan Peterson, I'm a big fan. I don't think any guy has it all put together.
So that's okay. So that's right. Okay. So it's not a demonization of aggression.
Yeah.
Right.
So we got to be. I think it would be better serving to us to this is part of that healthy dialogue. Mm-hmm. The things that we just talked about, Andrew Tate, the things that I would celebrate and agree with, for his fighting career and love about him, but then he takes it out and that's not me. I don't see that as a masculine trait that is going to be something that I go, yeah, I want that. Absolutely not.
Well,
absolutely not.
And I think it goes to
it's not demonization.
Correct.
It's not castigating and knocking down masculinity. It's just I don't see it.
And I think it's important too. Like part of being a man is knowing when to turn it on and turn it off.
Right?
Yeah,
Self-regulation, self-control.
And I will never forget my wife. When I was talking to Marines on the phone that called me on the weekend and said they're in jail or some other crap like that, my voice, like just how I talk to Marines is different than how I talk to my wife. And I never realized it until she pointed it out. She's like, I could tell you're on the phone with your Marines. I was like, how?
Absolutely.
You guys talk about Jordan Peterson. He always talks about how like a man should be a monster, but that he should be able to control it. And
Correct.
a man should have the capacity to kill and know how to control that. And by the way, women think that's hot.
But that's the whole. I mean, that's the point of self-regulation,
Right.
self-control, self-awareness.
Yep.
Right, and to be able to step into the power of your masculinity, which will awaken the power of that feminine quality in a woman. But if you can't regulate that and you don't know how to actually wield these masculine traits, unfortunately, I think if you cannot self-regulate and operate in self-control, the byproduct of that is going to fall into the unfortunate newly created terminology of potential toxic masculinity. They identified it as something, so roll with it, because that's what they're identifying with.
Yeah, and again, I think it goes back to when I hear toxic masculinity, I think the way
And
I
assault.
interpret that term is masculine traits are toxic, and
Right.
Yes.
I disagree with that 100%. And
I go right to the gray, so I'm not thinking that extreme.
Correct. And so again, I think, when you're talking about being able to self-regulate and all that, I view that as masculine traits, what it means to be
Yes.
able
Well,
Exactly.
and James,
Yeah.
let me
I
ask you a
think-
question. So let's go, James, because James gave some pretty great examples, and Jamie, we'll come back to your childhood too, and stuff like that. So, James, in your childhood, like you said, you were given advice from males. I'll even change the term on that way. Males, not men. Males of saying, would you agree with that? You have a son, correct?
Yes.
Would you give that advice as masculine advice to your son to have that kind of behavior that they told you to do?
Absolutely not.
So that's why I come back to it and say maybe it was just a male that just said was bad behavior. Do you say instead of going, because if you look at the traits, so let me ask a question. So have you given your son then more masculine advice?
Yeah, like with his kids, we talk family,
Yeah.
we talk responsibilities,
Right.
we talk
Providing, protecting,
Exactly.
Getting his money, his mind, all things ready, right?
Yeah,
So which
exactly.
are masculine traits. So anything separated from that is just bad behavior. And see, the one thing I think we need to do, and that's why I think that's why me and Aaron, I think, get along so well on this, is because if we don't define terms what they stand for, it's very easy in arguments. And remember, we're all, I know, well, Jamie and I especially, and Brent, well, we're all massively involved in what your involvement in politics is. But you have to be very particular about what you're talking about, because otherwise in politics they just throw out general terms to try to shut people down. Do you see what I'm saying? And it's like, because if I have a disagreement with somebody, they'll say, well, you're a bigot and you're a racist and you're a misogynist. And I'm going, okay, what do you mean? You're saying by that, what's the evidence to say that way? If I've done something that way, then you can call it that bad behavior. And see, but they try to label people. And so that's why I go, man, if you look at what happens is most young boys are confused what masculinity is.
Yeah.
Because I know it's really funny. Here, watch this. Did your son play any sports?
basketball,
Your daughter's playing sports?
basketball, softball, and volleyball.
Right. Now, now this is a question for everybody too. Do you think that they should get participation trophies? Or are you trying to get them to die? But here's my point. So
need that.
in the world of sports, masculine traits are in nowhere if you're males or females are extremely valued.
Yep.
But to the world, it's not. And so the idea is this. And so you'll even teach your girls, honey, go and beat them, whoop them, destroy them. Do you see what I'm saying? Now, once again, you don't mean that, like harm them, but you have those generalized things that's like, I say, hey, go and Flynn dominate. Take no prisoners. Flynns don't care if you know what I'm saying? No, you see what I'm saying?
Yep.
And see, so what happens, but you're still expecting them as a honorable person to have competitive spirit that won't cross that line. But that would be bad behavior. That wouldn't be still considered masculinity or even femininity. You know what I'm saying? So, what you got there, Ross?
So we keep on saying, it's not the behaviors, right? But the very things that we're talking about are behaviors that
I
define
know what you're talking
masculinity.
about.
Well, no, the things that you're saying that we are saying make up masculinity, right? Those are behaviors that to be celebrated. But then there's also
Actually, the traits and characteristics are not behaviors.
Gender roles are behaviors.
Yes, but the
That's
masculinity
like-
is characteristics.
Yeah.
It's not behaviors.
okay. Well, we keep calling behaviors, and that's where I think the behaviors is where we're seeing the toxicity come from.
Thank you. But see what happens this. If you look at like for example, they said, so if you look at in general, if you look at it this way, and even how society is built, providing, saying, watch this, and I've got hundreds of female employees, is if you think of it this way, if a female employee was try to keep up with me just working per day, what could actually physically happen to them, and we've seen it happen.
Oh, they get sick.
Oh, yeah.
They get sick because biologically they're not meant to keep up with that level. Their body will physically give out compared to a male's. You saying?
I worked out twice on Saturday and I have a cold.
Yeah.
Guys, that's what this is from.
Yes. Go ahead, Brent.
No, on that too. So the Marine Corps did a bunch of studies back in. I was teaching new lieutenants how to be infantry officers, and because I was just south of the Pentagon in Washington D.C. during the integration, we had to do a lot of studies on at what level does female integration into the infantry unit degrade combat effectiveness.
Yep.
Well, we did the studies, and it turned out Congress didn't like the studies, and then they said that we were misogynists and we didn't know how to evaluate females
Right.
as infantry officers or anything like that. But when you're talking about just the physical differences, hiking with packs and everything that Marines and soldiers do, they were getting stress fractures and hurting their pelvises and becoming basically unable to have children
right.
in the future.
The military's not made for women.
No.
Well,
Well,
there's
that's
Women
sorry,
aren't
I'm going to
made for the
disagree there
military.
because some of the great things from the study was we found out where females actually
Right.
were better than men in that. So radio operators, when a female was on the
I
radio
see.
giving a communication,
Sure.
it was more clearly transmitted on the first time than if a man was.
Right.
And with so if you're wounded, they did a study on what the chance of survival with like injuries, and if the helicopter medic or whoever you want to call it was a female, the rate of survival increased. And a lot of the theory behind that is because men didn't want to die in front of a woman. Whether it's true or not, I don't know, but that was one of the theories from
But
the
I'm just
study.
saying, like, on the
Yeah.
battlefield.
Oh,
Like,
absolutely.
You
agree.
know, that's
Oh, I
where
don't-
that's hardcore. That's what I'm saying.
if I go
The
into
other
battle,
stuff-
I don't want a woman standing next to me.
Well,
Right.
I don't want a woman standing.
I don't.
I don't want to be on the battlefield.
Do you saying? It's
Right.
like that's well, that's the point.
I'll make you all the sandwiches you want and I'll cut the crust off.
Peanut butter on the edges.
Just go out there. You are so strong. Go.
Well, and it's really funny. We need to talk about this too because the majority. See, what happens is you always like to hear about the exceptions, not the rules. And that's one thing about the podcast. Say, listen, don't give me exceptions. Talk about the rules. If I ask the majority, and I can tell you right now, 9 out of 10 women I ask, I say, listen, if your husband was amazing, and he could provide like crazy, would you choose to go to work or stay home? 9 out of 10 women say what?
Stay home.
Same.
But then what happens? It's the modern day culture, not of femininity, because I don't even want to even use the word feminine with this aspect. That's why I even hate the word feminist. Is the fact it's modern day women that say, "Well, oh my goodness, I can't believe that you don't want a career and don't want to do this." And this is like going,
Exactly.
and yet most women innately are going, "Hey, guess what? Give me a strong masculine man that can provide, and I'll pop out babies like crazy." And that's going to bother some feminists right now that I said that like crazy.
Yeah, it's
And
funny
it's like-
because it's that idea of like, oh, I don't want to be a housewife and have a husband boss me around, but I'm totally fine being an office wife and having a male boss tell me what to do, how to do it, and what it's worth.
True.
Yeah.
And actually, you know what's really funny? Included in this room, if I ask the majority of women who you want to work with, men or women, what do you think women say most of the time?
Oh, men.
Men.
1000%.
Yeah.
I've worked for you.
Yes.
When I was going for jobs, my mom legitimately would pray for me to find good men to work with because women are just hard
Women
to
are
work with when they're in
evils.
big
Oh my
groups,
gosh.
especially.
Well, what happens? Here's what happens. I think what happens
Their
is
cycles probably sync up or something. I don't know.
well, and that's why. So I want you to say I want you to run on a statement. I want you to tell me what you mean by that when you said women are evil.
I didn't say women.
No,
Are
Jamie.
I the thing is women are just so catty and they throw each other on their table and they gossip behind each other's back. Women are just, they have this competitive nature. I'm better than you. I do more than you. I'm like, boo boo,
but
I
I
stay at home and I love it.
But
Like, you can't compete with me.
Do you think that's because in the workplace, though, you need to be masculine and these women are all stepping into a masculine role and that's why it's not working?
Well, it could
Or
be,
not?
absolutely. But I know people who are stay-at-home moms, and they're just jerks, and they're just constantly at each other. And I was like, but I also believe that a man should be running companies. Like one of my children go to a school, and it's women that run the school, and it's amazing and great. But a man is just bulldozes, gets things done, no emotion.
Jamie,
Yep,
now
stop
you can
complaining.
come back and work here again because you've grown and changed.
I know I have.
See, so it's like because you were kind of a boss bitch before, but now it's kind of funny that you've had
God
it.
has touched my heart.
Thank you. And God has touched my heart and actually pulled me into the roles thing. So that's the cool part. Because I had to tell the boss bitches, shut up. No matter what the culture said before. and stuff like that, going, this is my company. I know how to take care of people better than anybody. And guess what happens? In everybody's life, and money went up like crazy.
But I think, like, for me, like, when I was so aggressive, it's because I was raised with boys and I had to
Right.
take on this persona. I was raised with a single mom who didn't take a dime from any man but sucked from the government, you know? It's like, once you take a step back and see their bigger picture, it's like, dang it, we need the men to be... It's that fine line. Like, I'd rather a man lead me into battle. Like, dude, all day, out of every man here, you're the one I want in battle. Like, just saying. Because you have that masculine quality because you've been in the Marines. Like, you've been trained in your brain. Right? This Tate dude, great talker, but I don't want him in battle. But I see as a woman, we need the men to lead.
I think toxic masculinity and the idea of women needing the feminism, let's go that direction. The whole concept is to neutralize the field, right? If we deem so much as toxic masculinity that they have to come down, and too much of femininity is weak. What do you mean you want to stay home? What do you mean you just want to cook and clean and, right? What do you mean?
Get up to the mic.
If we demean all of the feminine qualities and we're demeaning all the masculine qualities, we're simply trying to neutralize and cause confusion and chaos.
Right.
Yeah.
It depolarizes the sexes, and then there's no attraction.
Exactly.
And the
And
one
there's no, I don't know that it's okay to define one without the other, right? Like, where the definition of toxic masculinity come from? Probably
women.
toxic women,
It's interesting.
right?
Probably the
Like,
brunchers
where
just
did
sitting around
the
all the time.
The crunchy
It's
Right?
interesting
Like-
though that
Crunchy moms
as
group.
much,
There you go.
Crunchy moms group. It's the
Jamie
brunchers.
said it.
It's the brunchers.
Jamie said
it's
it.
the upper class white women sitting having brunch.
it's interesting though that as much as we've seen the over feminization of everything, what did the women actually have to become more?
Masculine.
Masculine. You can't do away with these characteristics.
They're
period.
needed
It
for
doesn't-
society.
It doesn't matter if I'm negating my masculine role, it's going to show up in the feminine role.
Yes.
I lived it for 25 years.
Well, and I
So
think
the vacuum
I
won't-
think that's terrible for women. And
That's why I was
like,
saying.
we're
Exactly.
talking-
It is.
You know,
Exactly.
Yes.
It's not really what we want.
you were saying, you know, oh, do you want to stay at home and not go to work and cook and clean or anything like that? Like, I take great pride in the fact that my wife doesn't have to work full time now.
So-
And you know what? If she wanted to work, or well, she does work, but she works because she wants to, and you know, she also does a lot of the house chores. But if she didn't do that, our house would be a sty that like even I wouldn't want to live in because, quite frankly, you know, at the end of the day, I come home from work, I play with the kids as much as I can. But she still does bath and, you know, the first bedtime, I just tell them good night and, you know, I love you, good night. But my wife is the one that, like, really takes care of them. And without those feminine traits there, I think the family would be dysfunctional. And so it's not, you know, masculinity isn't we're better than you by any means. And again, I think, like we're all saying here, you need that good balance between masculinity and femininity. And quite frankly, I'll be honest, I can't provide both of those roles.
Right.
Not supposed to.
No.
Yeah.
Correct.
You're not
It-
supposed
You
to.
shouldn't.
And it shouldn't
Well-
be role reversal anyways.
Let's go back to that. Let's go back to Jamie said about James also too, because you said your mom had to fill both those roles, correct?
Yes, sir.
And what was it like for her?
Well, we joke a lot now because I finally understood what it was for her to do double duty because I wasn't an easy kid. My dad, I watched the police kick our door in, take my dad away, and then showed up and visited him in prison. And so that was my go-to until I was about 5.5 years old. And I still remember it plain as day. But from that point on, my mom shielded me from every negative thing that he had going on. Because the thing that he did, people, like if he did it today, people will come after our family for what he did. So my mom was constantly worried about that kind of stuff too. And so, yeah, I was a rough kid because it's all a confusing dynamic to me. But yeah, she both roles. And then when I became a teenager, like 13 or 14, me and my mom had it out. And like I wouldn't hit my mom, but I got to a point where you're going to stop clubbing me like a baby seal. And so I was, 13 or 14, and all I did was she swung at me, I caught her hand, she swung at me again with the other one, and I just held her. I'm like, I'm done. I said, I get it, I'm done. And we've been fine ever since. And then when I have my kids, she's always like, if I have a bad day, I can call my mom and be like, yeah, this happened, whatever. And then she's that nurturing mom.
Right.
Instead of that boss mom, like, nah, you need to do this for the kids. You need to do this. It's nice now.
Yep.
But yeah, it's both roles for sure. So I feel like we're related.
I was going to say, Jamie, what about your mom?
Can you ask the question again?
Well, so what was it like for her in discussions you have with her now, having her to govern both those roles?
Well, my situation is a little different. My mom has been an addict my whole entire life,
Right.
and she still is. We don't have really much of a relationship, and so we don't sit and talk
Sure.
about our past because it was so toxic, and she's still in a really rough spot. So I don't bring up those things.
Got her. Okay. See, and that's the thing. It's like, now here's one thing that if we think about this way, when it comes to both of you guys that way, does your past control what you have done in the future?
No.
Influenced, yes. Controlled,
Yes.
absolutely
No,
not.
influence is different than control.
Yeah.
Because there's thoughts that go through my head for things I'm like going, and you can relate to past, even not just childhood, past, everything that way.
Yeah.
But it still doesn't control your behavior today.
Right.
So I understand that we all can, as this, I can't, I've really changed on this a lot over the years this way, but so once again, you can disagree with me on this way. I look at everybody's childhood, even if your mom was an addict or bad dad gone that way, you wouldn't be here without him.
Oh, 100%.
There's certain
Yeah.
lineage you have to pay respect to that way.
Yep.
And I don't want to ever criticize my mom and dad because I think it's disrespectful to your parents in general, because and what happened in anything, because once again, I had family members in prison, things like that, and then there was times where very poor and stuff like that. It's like going, but it didn't stop me for what I'm doing today.
Right.
I
But
can't
it
say it
did
doesn't have
shape you.
influence. Can't say it doesn't have influence. But here's what happens this, and then I got questions for all you guys, and think this way. So then, if you think of this way, is who helped you fill that feminine role that actually made you become the person I see today?
My grandma.
Okay. Aaron, what about you?
Oh. Honestly, probably my grandma.
Ross, what about you for as far as a masculine role?
Who's helped me become who I am today in regard to my masculine role? Jesus.
Loves you.
This I know. It's hard to say. I can't pin it to one person. I have a collective because the most stabilizing element in my life was my mom. Come from this.
Absolutely, and there's nothing wrong with it. But what I'm saying is this, and your mom, who's absolutely wonderful, Pat. Hi, I love you. You're amazing.
But I can't.
But the idea is this. But there's still. But I don't mean this in a negative way. Your mom helped you become survive today.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? There are people that have. But your mom didn't make you a man.
No, but I cannot attribute this quest of where I'm at today to one person.
No, but there's not to be. But there's still here. What we all know, there's still more influences.
Okay,
than that.
I'll take it. I
Okay.
influenced myself because I got tired of what I was.
Okay, Dana.
My mom, for sure.
It's my uncles.
Okay.
My dad.
Yeah.
And quite frankly, the Marine Corps also. But really,
Yeah.
the only reason I became who I was in the Marine Corps is because of the foundation my dad set and taught me.
Sure. But see, there's a key thing you just said. You had to be taught. See, that's the thing, and it can be taught. Do you understand? If not, and I think it's by nature that, call it sin, call it what you want that way. But we all have children. You don't have to teach a 2-year-old to be bad. But if they're not taught and grown up properly, what happens is this. What happens, that 2-year-old will stay that at 12, 16, 22, 42, and then they blame a childhood trauma. So I think that's why I love these questions on the podcast, is the emotions that you guys have brought in already to people. I guarantee they're learning something, and they go, you had a horrible childhood, things, this. We've all had some bad things that way going, but maybe just from the examples that you guys are given, people can learn from that, and they're not blaming their childhood.
Yeah.
Because I mean, think this way. I want you to think of this. What if your parents were watching this and saw you talk about that way? Well, even this, but what would your mom and dad think watching this if you were talking bad about that you had a tough childhood? What would you, wait, let me ask this. If I go around and talk to all your kids and stuff and say, because you know what's really funny? I think of it this way. There isn't any, and I think it's psychological bullshit that they have related everything to childhood traumas because it's a great excuse for you not taking active control of your life right now. And so therefore, guess what happens? And you look at any parent, and here, watch this. They've convinced people. Psychology is some big bullshit. It's like, because you think of it this way, it's like they're giving you an excuse to have bad behavior going forward.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, I don't care if the priest touched your pee-pee when you were little. It doesn't stop you from good actions today. I'm not saying it can't be influential. I'm just saying it's like this. It's like a person that's 300 pounds says, I don't know why I'm fat. Put the fucking food down.
Well, I think what it is, like a lot of times too, is people can be raised in the same environments. So like I had brothers who prison, jail all the time. They were raised in the same environment as me, where I used where I was raised as an example of what not to be. One of my brothers took his life 14 years ago. He laid that on the foundation is my childhood trauma, and I brought that little cookie into my adulthood. But then I started understanding personal development and unraveling all of that and learning from that. And I think what we need to do is childhood trauma. I've had some childhood trauma. Probably everybody at the table has. But that doesn't define your future.
I haven't.
But it also, it can shape you. Like, that's what I didn't want to be like. And I still don't want to be like. And my kids have to see their grandmother like that. And I've had heart-to-hearts with my mom about that.
Well, let me ask you something. And here's what happens. And I'll say, and here's what happens this. It can shape you if you're not taught by somebody else. Because here's what happens this. That's why I laugh when people don't train up their kids. Or they depend on the church to train up their kids, or the school to train up their kids. And I'm sorry, it should be the men in the household training up their kids, because guess what happens is, because then they send them to society, they're not going to have all the things that everybody here is talking about, that they can sit back and blame their childhood on that way.
Yeah.
And it's like, but here happens this, but they've created so many distractions for people that people say, well, I don't have time. Then people say, if I don't have time, then don't have children.
Amen.
I think even today, though, we use the excuse of trauma, whether it's childhood, adult trauma 5 minutes ago, to be a distraction, not to come into our masculine or our feminine traits.
Right.
Or just not to grow, or
Not
to take
to be-
responsibility, or to have to show up and push the envelope to truly bring out the best version of yourself.
So,
Exactly.
Brent,
And
I got a
become
question for you.
toxic.
So,
as
but
a
I mean, I
result.
believe that traumas do exist. I believe that they are there, and I believe that they happen. But it's not an excuse. It's not a license to not grow,
Right,
and
well-
to not change and not be different.
And think about Brent. Let me ask you a question. Entering the Marine Corps, would you agree with me, or some people that you may have known? And I've heard stories. My brother-in-law, Chris, he's absolutely amazing. He was in the military for 28 years as the Air Force that way. But he would tell me stories that that people would enter the military and they've had trauma. They weren't that good at people, some of this. But when they were trained and developed, they left great individuals. Have you ever seen things like that happen when you're in the military?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny because I was talking to one of your employees downstairs, but it was on the public school system around us when we moved. Sorry, I'll answer your question in a moment. We moved to where we live because the schools were rated an A. Within 10 years, they're rated like a D-, and that's why I send my kids to private schools that are outperforming. And part of the reason why is because teachers weren't allowed to do any sort of discipline. If a child was unruly in the classroom, they get the class outside and the kid can break whatever he wants in there, and then once he or she is calmed down, then they go back in and everything's fine. And so I told your employee that it was just like in the Marine Corps. We get all these people from various backgrounds. I mean, I had Marines that their parents were gangbangers doing life in prison, and slinging drugs out there, and it's a different life I didn't grow up with. But by the end of training, you'd have parents or relatives come up and be like, what did you do to my son? Like, he is a respectable person now. And the answer to me was simple. Like, we held them accountable and we disciplined them when they weren't.
So let me. So imagine that. So imagine that a parent does that. What kind of child do you think they'll have?
Generally speaking, I would say a great child. but-
Unless, now watch this. Now, what if a CEO does that to their company?
I'm sorry, what's that?
What if a CEO treats their company that way?
Again, yeah, there has to be limits to it. Otherwise, you will have a very demoralized and depressed. I mean, if everything, because in basic training, everything you do is wrong. It doesn't matter how good you do it. If you screw it up, you're all wrong, and you're going to all pay for that. And eventually, then you start building them up. But literally, you tear people down to the rawest form of humanity, to where, I had many thoughts of, I suck. Like, I am a terrible person. I'm never going to pass the Marine Corps. Like, I'm never getting out of here. I suck. And eventually you build up from that. But if you do that to your employees, where you come in, you're just, from day one, just riding them and saying, you suck, you're terrible, everything is wrong, they're going to leave, and they're not going to be
That's
better.
extreme, but the idea is this. But in order to get somebody to grow, they have to understand that they're not where they could be.
Oh, absolutely.
And I think the
Motivated.
military does that. They sit there and go, no one's going, language can be a little different, but the idea is this, the concept is correct, because here's what happens this. And because the over-feminization of society has said, because here's what happens, and Jamie, I'll use this example. You were around a bunch of women from before that were like more cared about people's feelings. So if I said, listen, you need to get better, you suck. In a woman-dominated world, that would be unacceptable because it would make somebody feel bad. I'm sorry, some people need to feel bad. Maybe your mom, maybe your brother, maybe your friends that actually have bad behavior, maybe they need to feel bad. It's like we can't make anybody feel bad anywhere.
Well,
And-
Right.
sorry to interrupt
go
you. So when you ask, what if a CEO of a company did that? Again, our companies are vastly different in size.
Yep.
But when one of my employees make a mistake, I let them know, you
Thank you.
really screwed this up. And I'm sure they feel bad, but I always follow that up with, don't let it happen again.
Yep.
And here's how we can correct what happened. Like, it's not the end of the world. Okay, a mistake happened. We can work
Exactly.
together to fix this.
Right, and that's where growth and encouragement come in. It's just that most of today, because it starts even with, it's even with the culture. It's like, because everybody talks about the extremes. They talk about extremes. It's like, right now, we were just talking about this the other day, in the car. If a person says, I discipline my kids, and I say I spank my kids, do you know they have to default right away because of public opinion going, well, I don't beat them, I don't abuse them. It's like, do you see how the bullshit happens away? We were just talking about this car the other day. A person I'm a fan of, Adrian Peterson. They demonized him because because he spanked his kids and stuff like that. And it was like, they spanked his kids and they demonized him, going, oh, he was abusing him. He said, I'd rather discipline him, make him good for society before he gets shot by the cops.
Right.
He was preparing them for what?
Life.
The world. Because once again, of some things that can happen to him. And I'm like going, and you guys are criticizing this man for preparing his son for the world? Because sometimes the world isn't fair to that to him and stuff like that. It's like going, I'd rather prepare my son, my daughter, my things for the real world that happens, instead of going, well, I just had childhood trauma, and then this, and it gives him an excuse not to move forward. See, and I go back to that one point I talk about this way. Imagine that I had all your kids on podcast right now, and they're like, I had childhood trauma. What would all you guys think?
It's not that bad. Liars.
I'll
Do
show
you see what I'm
you
saying?
trauma.
No, but that's the point. That's why this bull crap of psychology blame everything in childhood traumas. I'm like, good, let me go talk to your parents. They would feel ultimately disrespected because they'd be like, you wouldn't even be here if it wasn't for me. Do you know what I'm saying?
I
And so
disagree.
I said, so I want to. Yeah.
There was many people taking care of me
But
that my mom did not take care of me.
But you wouldn't even be here without your mom.
Oh, of course.
See, that's the thing.
because
So
she had
there's an
to
ultimate
birth
level of
me.
respect that you need to have.
Oh, yeah.
Do you see what I'm saying? And it doesn't mean, now, Bear, I'm not saying you don't call it your mom's bad behavior.
Yeah.
It's just that there's an ultimate level of respect you have to have for your parents. And I feel bad, even in my past, of even saying that if I would even speak bad about my parents, doesn't mean that I won't have a conversation with my dad or mom if they had bad behavior. But the idea is this, is like going, but I'm not going to tear on my family lineage just because of mistakes they made. Because
Right.
I can raise my hand saying I've had epic success.
Yeah.
But I'm also going to raise my hand and say I have an epic failure too. Do you see what I'm saying? And what do you want to be remembered in your generations? What do you want your kids to remember? You know, within 2 generations now, what do you want to be remembered for?
Success.
Your epic success.
Yep.
And see, so that's why when I challenge all you guys in some of the thing I'm talking about that way, it's like, it's because, man, I think that we have, and here, I'm going to push back on this just because it's me. Because I love Jordan Peterson. Everybody knows this. I love Jordan Peterson. But I'd rather go to battle with Andrew Tate than Jordan Peterson any day. Do you understand? Because here's what happens this, is we know this and we see what happened over the last 3 years. We see how, for example, and Brent, you know this, you know, I had the FBI show up at my house for just saying, do not comply to the stupidity. Wasn't doing anything unlawful, didn't do anything illegal, never been arrested, never been sued, never this is this. And sorry, I don't want a meek man standing next to me willing to fight going battle. I don't want a woman walking in the battle with me on this stuff. I met Dana because she stood up at VaxCon saying, when all the men are going to step up? I'm like, we can be friends.
Yeah.
We can be friends. Jamie, we became friends because you were that way too. Do you understand? But you know what's the sad part is this? If you were sitting there fighting a battle all day with me, you'd eventually get sick. Do you understand? So give me an Andrew Tate. Give me, and why? You guys demonize him because he prefers things different? Here, watch this. No one's gonna demonize Jamie for wanting a strong, taller, stuff like this way. So if he prefers his relationships to be something different, see what you do is you look at something you don't like and you got to attack that because you can't explain or can't control. So what you got, Ross?
I disagree with the notion that it's a demeaning, that I'm trying to cancel out Andrew Tate and his display of masculinity. I'm saying that right now, when we look at what is being promoted as ultra expression of masculinity,
Give me those traits, please.
he's loud, boisterous. He's been deemed as misogynistic, right? I mean, I've heard some of the ways that he's talked around women, and I look at some of these things, and I would rather have a Jordan.
We've known each other for 17 years. Things that we say behind closed doors, they would say the same thing about you and I.
Again,
and even Brent, and even James. I don't know you well, but probably if guys, because when guys get together, the shit that we talk about.
I think you're taking more of an issue with the fact of me having an issue with Tate. I'm saying as in a comparison of masculinity, what you say? Well, based on brute strength, in a fight, yeah, I would definitely take Andrew Tate. All day long. If we're going to stand up and get into some, argument or debate on psychology, I'm stepping onto the stage with Peterson all day long. Again, it's knowing thyself. It's having the full picture and the full embodiment and the self-control and the self-regulation. I just see the problem with the glamorization of certain aspects of masculinity.
But we all need, I'm sitting listening to you talk, and I'm like putting these puzzle pieces together. We need all of it in the Army, though.
We do. Like I said, I want to glamorize. I'm going to disagree there. I want to glamorize masculinity crazy, but you also want to glamorize the feminine traits too, because most women today are not being breaking those feminine traits to that way. Do you understand? Because here's what happens is I want Andrew Peterson, mine, all the masculine traits emphasized because they need to be brought, because that's what everybody wants. But I also want to see the feminine traits of women being the same kind of credibility, because the sad part is this: true feminine traits are being knocked down, and women having aggressive male traits are being propped up. And I'm like going, sorry, ladies, you're not us. And guess what happens? So let's say multi-level marketing, okay? And you've had a successful career doing it. If I got into it, I don't
dominate. Would you like to join?
Dominate. You wouldn't even have a chance against me. I wouldn't care
you're on my team, dude, we win.
There you go. But because you know why? Because the one thing that you do have in this one thing, when you look at society, masculine traits dominate success in every area of life. So therefore, that's why you took those traits that, once again, because you didn't have the female role model, you actually had those kind of masculine traits. So you went to the world in business, you succeeded, but you just even said, but you went to home, you failed. Now, Durham, I know your kids. I know your husband. Your kids are absolutely amazing. Know everything about it that way. You did a really good job at being able to go home and do that feminine aspect of your traits, and that's why your girls have turned out wonderful. Do you understand? And now if you just will list me and everything else, your life would have been better much faster. So,
Sorry, Dr. Flynn, real quick.
what you got? Yep.
One thing I just wanted to be clear on,
Yeah.
because I think you said masculine traits dominate success or
Yeah.
things like that. I mean, I understand that in certain concepts, but again, what defines success? Because if you're talking about success as showing a loving and nurturing family life for your children, sorry, I can't do that as well as my wife.
But those are feminine
Well,
traits,
that's
though.
right,
See,
yeah.
you
Well,
just
correct.
Yeah,
explained
you're
feminine
not supposed to do
traits.
it.
And you explained gender roles.
Exactly, but so I think
Yeah.
you said masculine traits dominate success.
In
I think-
society.
In
society,
society.
because here's what happens this. If you think this way, you a Packer fan?
Yes.
Okay, nurturing, compassionate, multitasking, listening. Guess what happens? Those are all great dominant feminine traits for the home. What will they do if you try to bring that to the Packers?
Oh, you'll get killed.
That's my point. See, if you think of it this way, men traits build society, women's traits build homes. Men traits society actually go to battle, and battle does not mean physical war. Battle means, guess what happens? I need to compete for a woman's affection. I need to compete for a job. Because guess what happens? One thing nice about this is those traits that you guys are endeared with that way, guess what happens? If you're a 40-year-old broke man, society will teach you who you really are. If you're a 40-year-old good-looking feminine woman, guess what happens? The world steal your oyster.
What, 40? Oh,
So-
are we moving the age range?
Not for you.
No.
Not for you. 35 is the top range. No, but get a point though. See, so what happens is, so when you look at success, and here's what happens this, and I know your wife and stuff like that, and she spews femininity. Okay, but I guarantee that when she moves into her job role, she kind of takes on those masculine traits to be successful there, doesn't she?
I'm sure she does. But again,
Yeah.
I would just want my
Yep.
problem with that statement
Yep.
is what is the definition of success? Because success to me
Yeah.
probably looks different than success to you or anybody
That's
else.
not true. Here's what happens this. It's not true at all. As a male, you want what? Mind, muscle, and money. You're a fantastic lawyer. You look great. You take care of yourself. You do everything that way. You ask any man what they want. If you look at a man and you watch self-confidence and moving forward, if they have mind, muscle, money, have together. And guess what happens is we all want a successful home life. And see, success is very simple and very attainable. And this is what people do. It's like, see, people confuse people all the time. Watch this. I believe very bad people that have money have created the statement. Money but doesn't bring happiness.
I disagree.
That's the point. It does. I tell people, then you don't know where to shop. Do you understand? And on top of it, I always tell people, for the over-spiritualized Christian people, I always say this, then you've never made enough money to give it away.
Yeah.
Because guess what happens? I actually gave a lot of money away, just to fight for freedoms. And it brought me great happiness when you called and said we won. And I celebrated. And I didn't get anything from it. Do you see what I'm saying? It's like, so they create these statements because if they can say success is different for everybody, that's not true. You want a good family. You want a good job. You want to succeed in things. It's actually, they make it so complicated, they think it's not attainable. And see, that's why I said we need to train our kids to go, it's attainable. You can get this. And so what happens is, so therefore, guess what happens? I don't know any guy that, it's like this. Every guy wants a good body, but they don't go and get it. But if they got it, they'd be happier. Every guy wants more money, but they don't get it, but they'd be happier with it. Because a lot more problems be gone, and then the great mindset. You know what I'm saying?
Well, and I think my thing is, I think male success or the definition of success for a man is different than
Yes.
that of a woman.
Yes.
And so that's why I just wanted to disagree with the statement that male traits bring success, because it brings success to males.
Let's say society, because here's what happens. This society, because we all know this. The one thing that I'm big on is studying success. It might be success from a male standpoint once again, because I'm a male, because I can speak to that. Okay, but here, let's do this. But when you enter the world of work, automatically by nature, here's what happens. It doesn't matter, how much you like your employee or how much you like your colleague. If the colleague stole your job from you, it's a bad day. There's always competition. There's always is. And if we could people understand that when you go in society, but if the feminine traits, which are fantastic at home, enter society, it destroys society. Let me prove it to you. How many of you guys, James, when your kids played sports, here's what happens. If they walked out and your daughter or son worked very hard to succeed at their sport, and then all of a sudden they celebrated the participation of other athletes participating. See, you all laugh about it that way, But what brought participation trophies? It wasn't a male.
Oh.
It was like going, everybody should have a chance. That's not true. Everybody should not have a chance.
Take those trophies away.
That's right. I would never let my...
I tell my kid, like,
My
that's
kid
not
was 3
real.
years
You did
old,
not
but
win,
turn
just so you
around.
know.
But see, so what happens is this. So then therefore it's... And that's why I kind of laugh about this. When women, I see this in politics, because, you and I are involved in politics a lot because we have to fight for that way. And I always love when women say, women politicians say, well, if it wasn't for men, it wouldn't be for war. If it wasn't for war, you wouldn't be safe.
Yeah.
Do you understand? Because there's a lot of reasons why people do not attack the U.S. Remember, you don't have to fight to have people leave you alone. You just better be the biggest stick. And I mean this very sincerely. That's why if we're going to go into battle, I'll take Andrew Tate and his body and his fighting ability over Jordan Peterson. But you guys don't realize, if you guys study both of them, Andrew Tate and Jordan Peterson get compared to all the time. They both call them the same thing. So their characteristics, their thought, their mindset, it's just that, just like this. Jamie, you've even said this to me in the room privately. You could say, Doc, I love everything you say, but you could say it better. Don't tell me how to say it. See, you've said that to me. That was your over spiritualization stuff.
But I was also bold enough to bring you in a room, to be honest.
And I told you, shut up.
You didn't.
I told you.
Respectful.
I was respectful,
respectful,
but I just told you basically it's respectfully shut up, let me be me. You saying? And it's like, I did. I'm like, just let me be myself that way. And I had to get the boss bitches out of here, say, listen, because why? Because they try to be a culture trying to control me. But me, actually uncontrolled in most females' eyes, actually led for a better female workplace and everything like that. Everything. See, and that's why I said, so the idea of the fact that those male traits are important. But it happens this. Brent, guess what happens? Don't want you showing up in an apron at my house. You know what I'm saying? It's like,
I won't.
But we will go on the golf course. And we'll talk shit like crazy, and we'll do fun stuff. We had a blast and stuff of that. It's like, and see, that's the attributes about it. And so celebrating those masculine traits should be, but also celebrating those feminine traits are. I disagree with you. I want those masculine. I want Andrew Tate, Jordan Peterson, all these traits to be put at a high level that way. Because you know why? Because then young men have something to strive for, and then guess what happens? And here's what happens. I don't want men going towards weak men to be trained up and taught. I don't want boss bitches teaching young ladies. Do you see what I'm saying?
I disagree with you.
Yeah.
I'd rather be him as the poster child for, not child, but you know what I'm saying, as masculinity.
Well, I appreciate that because I don't think
rather than an Andrew Tate. I'd take this in a heartbeat.
Well, here's what happens this.
Well,
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate the disagreement.
Going back to his thing, though, is if we're in a battle, right, and I'm facing Andrew Tate, I'm going to get my ass whooped unless I can bring something with me.
Yeah.
In which case, which equalizes it.
Nope.
So, and I think it goes down to the examples that you're using, Doc, is the lawyer asking to define words, right? But when it comes to battle, and I think you were saying if it's an intellectual battle, you'd rather have Jordan Peterson with you.
All day long.
But I also think when we're talking masculinity, I don't immediately go to, well, that's intellectualism, because I think throughout the history of man, masculinity was fighting for food, fighting for
Freedom.
Yeah, well, your freedom, but fighting for everything you have. Intellectual, smarts came later, I guess. To the men.
But what about the men who wrote the Constitution and the men who sat through all of that intellectualism? But I think that we have had to demean that so much so that we can demonize the other attributes.
Yep. And I'm not saying intellectualism is not important at all.
Right. But I'm just saying, I think it's always been there.
Right.
How do we invent the wheel, right? Like there's some ingenuity there. We've just downplayed it through culture, through every sitcom, through everything.
Well, so I absolutely agree with you with sitcoms. If you try to find a movie in the last, I don't know, I when my son was born, I was like, why are there no cartoon movies with a strong male character? You couldn't find them.
That's on purpose.
Always the male characters were the aloof, stupid, big and strong, but stupid. But when it comes down to the people, the founding fathers writing the Constitution, yes, they were intellectual, but what else did they do?
They were ready and willing to fight.
Oh, sure. Absolutely.
They
With
fought before
mind
they got to
and
the table.
muscle.
Yep.
So anyway,
All right.
a long time on your first question.
Yeah, I say it was a long time. It was a great question.
That's
Great
why we only
dialogue.
have two.
Love the emotion. Love the things behind it. It's fantastic. All right. Next question, and it relates to this, and you guys kind of touched on it a little bit that way, so it builds upon this. Feminism was not created for women. That's my statement. Agree or disagree?
I'm confused.
Think about it. Feminism was not created for women.
Can I pass?
I was going to say, you want to go around the table the other way, so she's.
Let's
not
go,
up
let's
on
go.
the spot?
Yeah, thank you.
All right. I disagree.
Okay.
I can agree with that.
I knew you would. That's the thing.
I agree.
Ross? Feminism was not created for women.
I agree.
I absolutely agree.
I still don't know. Like, I feel like I want to tease this out.
Okay, let's do this. We'll let you
I'm
hold
on
your.
the fence.
We'll let you hold it. But see, that's why. See, we just changed this, and I have to thank Joshua and Ross for coming up with this. Is the fact that's like the reason why we wanted to get everybody's agree and disagree first, because sometimes what happens is some people change their opinions on some of the things just by listening to our people that are going, oh, maybe I think of this a little bit differently, and that's the one thing I love about this. And I can't thank you guys enough for that first question. I love the emotion behind each one of you guys. I love the emotion behind you and you and you and expressing. And because here's what happens this, because the cool thing is this is we're all going to learn from each other. But it also shows that, guess what happens? We can look at each other and disagree and sit down. We don't have to go to fist fighting. We don't have to go there. That's the whole point. And you can sit down with both men and women and have a great discussion about this. And that's the best thing about it. And Durham, I guarantee everybody here who's been married has actually had a disagreement with their spouse. And it got emotional. And you just didn't quit on them. You understand? That's the great thing about it. It's okay to be emotional that way and stuff like that. Yes, and sometimes it's good to get. I know I saw your face. It's good to give up on them sometimes. Okay, but here's what I want you to think about this. So Brent, what I want you to do is obviously because I want you to articulate your ideas, your thoughts, your things on it that way. But why don't you start with us?
So the reason I disagreed with that is because I think feminism, when it first started, so that first wave, long before I was born, was absolutely for women because it gave them the right to vote. It gave them other rights that we as society, as men, had. And I think that is a great purpose for it. What feminism is today, I think, is nothing like what it started out as. So if you were to ask feminism today, it was for women, I'd say absolutely not. Because if you look at some of the writings, postings, whatever you want to call it, of today's feminists, it's not only just anti-man everything, but it's also creating an ideal for a woman that I think goes against nature. So that the only reason I disagree is I think it absolutely started out the originalist feminism, if there is such a thing, started out for women to help give them a voice in society and some of the rights that they didn't have.
Yeah, and I don't want to no, actually I'll wait to the end. So let's go on. I'll wait on this one.
That's what I say. Agree?
You agree?
Yeah, agree.
Yeah. Okay. So the reason I think that it was not created for women is because it's another tactic to create a riff. And if you keep everybody riffing here, riffing there, you can slide so much stuff by. So we're sitting there fighting over feminism, but this guy here is taking money out of our pocket or emptying our house and just robbing us blind, but we're sitting here arguing over who should be cooking and cleaning.
And believe it or not, that's actually a true history of feminism. Feminism was not started by women. Actually, it was started, you go into a history of it this way. It was trying to divide the family and get women to workforce for more tax basis and that, because the majority of women did not want it at all. Do you understand that when they actually gave women the right to vote, the majority of women did not want it at all because that means they could now be drafted. So this concept, see, they create talking points. Feminists create talking points as we did it for the rights of women. Isn't it funny that they act like women were so unhappy until all this stuff happened?
Right.
But you speak something long enough that's not the truth, it becomes the truth.
Yep.
See, I look at it that it's always been an agenda-driven mindset, right? That was more of a weaponization
Yep.
of this concept of the feminization of America, or whatever. Go back to your question again with the
Feminism was not created for women.
Wasn't created for women. It's very destabilizing.
That's right.
To the family. I get what they were maybe trying to do, but I think that was part of the over romanticizing of what they were trying to do, but it was smoke and mirrors to the weaponization and the agenda that they really had, and we're seeing it in spades today.
Yep. Agree.
Hands down.
Yeah, I agreed with that. What feminism was not created for women, because I don't think that it was created for women. I think it was created kind of like how we talked about, to destroy women, right? Just like how we've been talking about how masculinity has, kind of been destroyed. I think feminism is the way to destroy femininity. And if you, inside of feminism, lots of women just end up becoming more masculine, and that is extremely unattractive to men. And so when you look at feminism too, this idea that the sexes are equal, like, no, they're not. That's the point. And so that's my whole issue with it. It doesn't make any sense. And we talk about TV all the time, and how TV is just programming everybody, and it's the smart woman and the dumb man, because then when people see that on TV, then that's how they act in real life. It's called a television for a reason.
Agreed. Feminism, I think, it just brings out the expression of more masculine traits.
There you go.
It's destroying what was. You said that your mom was one of your biggest influencers.
Yeah.
We all named women as the biggest influencers in our life. And your grandmother, right? And my mom had to be very strong in some situations as I was growing up, and had to live in a more masculine situation.
So did mine.
So she did not teach me. She did not bring me into this. I absolutely appreciate her for showing me those roles. But when you asked who influenced me, I've come into a place where I truly treasure those feminine qualities. And I see that I got those from my grandmas. But look at when they were raising kids. The 50s. Right? Like they were getting married in the 40s and 50s, and they were able to. So I don't know if your mom was a stay-at-home mom, or if she, I mean, that was the part. I don't know. I've been fighting feminism all my life. In college, I had a college professor start talking about we should start screening kids as young as kindergarten for what track to put them on. I said, what if a kid just wants to be a mom? He said, well, there is no such thing. Like nobody wants to do that anymore. That's old and antiquated. I said, well, this one does, and I'm sitting there in my last semester of college to be a teacher. Like, oh, shoot.
And if you maybe taught them that was an empowering role to be in, and that not just being out in the workforce or having OnlyFans and casual sex was the empowering thing, maybe they would choose that.
Yeah.
My
Jamie?
fans didn't work out.
I understand where you're coming from now, because but I see things in such a bigger picture that the government's constantly destroyed. So what happened is you had the women's rights movement and the sexualization in the 60s morphed into this feminism movement. So I 100% agree, because they needed more working people to be in debt, to be slaves to the system.
Yes. And that's what happens. That's why they try to break up the family. And that's why, if you ever think of it this way, it's interesting. They've so distracted our population. They so try to keep parents so busy so they can influence them. It's really funny. I was just telling the story to my family the other night. Is I know a guy who's extremely wealthy who has a friend who's a billionaire. Okay, I know the guy. I don't know the billionaire personally, but the idea is this: and he was so upset because he sent his kid to an Ivy League school. Now, obviously, he was a little bit more obviously a capitalism, conservatism, just based on he came from nothing, became a billionaire, and so therefore, what he ended up doing, he sent his child because he could provide to him, and then she went into 4 years of indoctrination in college, and now his daughter doesn't even talk to him because of what they've conditioned her to think that way.
Yeah.
And it's funny. It's like, and if you can, that's why I even tell people, it's like when my girls, if they go to church, they go to the Christian school, I'll say, and even like that happened last night, Trinity, my daughter is so smart when it comes to politics. I would say, listen, as a, and we just had a discussion last night, did we not? That all of a sudden my kids are now so trained up properly to say, okay, what did pastor tell you? what did the teacher tell you? And they will be respectful as a society member. But I said, be respectful, but never listen. Because they're listening, they're trying to condition you to control you for some aspect. Does it fall with the tenets that we believe in? Does it fall with our faith? Does it fall with our family values? Does it follow things like that? If it doesn't, I'll tell you the pastor's wrong, he's an idiot. I'll tell your teacher. And get this, and we have more of a liberal person teaching at Christian college, or Christian school where my daughter goes to. And I'm just waiting. It's because I said, it's like, tell me, and because I've had to correct that person teaching politics from our Christian school. But see, I won't even just, that's Christian. Well, really? Do we want to go into the whole Christian thing, how messed up that whole thing is, too? You say I'm indoctrinating people like crazy and separating the family, and pastor being the head of the family compared to like the husband. Happens a lot more than you think it does.
Absolutely.
And it's like if a pastor's an authority in your family and the wife believes that, guess what happens? They'll destroy a marriage. You say I'm so
if I can, well, just because
now you changed the thought
no, I
process
haven't.
now.
I haven't. No. So again, when I hear feminism, and it's probably because I went to law school at UW, and so what we learned was in the women's suffrage, the cases that happened there, and again, it gave people rights. But I'll be honest, when I hear feminist or feminism, no offense to the ladies, but I just kind of fine, you do you. And so it comes down to I don't know enough about this subject, but from what I learned, it mostly goes back to the cases which gave females rights that they didn't have in the past, which I support. So again, today, what feminism is today, or my understanding of feminism today, I think is so much different than what it was long before I was born.
So So can I be a little controversial here?
I want to see
If you
some
take my question, I'm going to be really
No,
mad.
I will come back to you and then come back to you guys that way. But can I be a little controversial? And remember, let me just say this. I'm always good at articulating my thing, but I got to make a statement that's going to piss everybody off, including my audience that way. I don't think we all should have the same rights. Let me explain. And I'm talking male, female. I'm not saying things. And here's why. Because, watch, it's so much easier to manipulate women emotionally than it is to do men.
Yeah.
So therefore, I don't want 5 women voting the same as 5 or like against 5. I'm sorry. I sit there and go, because all you have to do in politics is just create an emotional argument that's not logical at all. Remember, relationships are psychological. One's psycho and one's logical. I'll give you the guess. Okay?
What you laughing at, James?
James is like, see, everybody laughs, but they go, every woman I said, they go, kind of true, you know what I'm saying? But see, I'm willing to say what people won't say. And it was the boss bitches of the past, and Jamie, you knew a bunch of them, that I had to get rid of out of here to say, get out of my way. And the company got bigger, stronger, better, happy females, employees, everything like that way. And see, but I want you to think about it this way. So I understand, but you know some of this? Just like women didn't want to go to war or instead the right to vote, because you know what? The majority of them didn't, because I don't want to be put in the same positions. And guess what happens? And now we're sitting here going, I don't want females being berets and being the front line of the battle, because it's not equal. The equal means the same. I don't want to date somebody like me. That's why I choose the opposite sex. See, so I'm not saying that, for example, see, I know people will take it out of context, just like you say, if you spank your kids, they think you're going to abuse it. And see, this is what they do. And they do this in law schools. They do this everywhere. They do this on TV. They do this in politics. Everybody wants to talk about the exceptions, not the rules. Because they hear about the one bad person that beat up his wife. And I'm not saying it doesn't happen more than once, but they use the extremes. Because the majority of us men have never slapped a woman. But see, what they'll do is they'll say, oh, take away the right. And see, that's where I think we have to stop talking about the exceptions, not the rules. Because now we have minority tyranny.
Yeah.
Don't believe me? Look at the LGBTQ, whatever the fucking alphabet they stole from us now. Do you follow me on that? Mm-hmm. And see, so that's why it's like, and I said, and I believe that we should all have equal rights under the law, and I agree with that. But I'm sorry. If I'm going to manipulate a crowd, I'm going to go speak to a bunch of women, not a bunch of men. Emotionally. Heck, why do you think that consumers, all of television and consuming isn't geared towards men? Who's it geared towards?
Women.
Emotional manipulation. That's why I don't want my kids watching that stuff, because I have all girls. I want to protect them and train them up and say, don't be manipulated by these emotional things that way. So you were going to say something? And then Dana?
So here's the thing is, and I'm all like, once I understood the trap of feminism, I kind of understood more so of like what Patrick is saying is this women's right things created like, oh, women got to vote. Dude, they were chilling at home. They were baking bread. They were out understanding society. And I'm very thankful I can vote because a lot of you liberals are just ridiculous when you vote. I know how to educate myself. But what it has turned into is these women's rights are now, you can murder your child because you have the rights. Because they got empowered to murder now kids.
Can I comment on that?
That's
real quick?
comment. Go as long as you want.
One of the things, I think you started off the last one saying you're going to anger people because you didn't think that everybody should have the same rights. But then a little later you said, I think everybody should have the same rights. So
Under the law.
Yeah.
Under the law. And so that's okay, under the law. Got it. When it comes to the whole abortion issue, one thing that has, and I've had people, because I am very pro-life, and when I've spoken to people who are pro-choice, I say, okay, let's take the baby out of the equation for a moment. What is the definition of death? It's a cessation of mind activity and a heartbeat. And I said, okay, so the opposite of that, if you have brain activity and a heartbeat, aren't you alive? Well, yes. Okay, so now let's put the baby in there. When does brain activity start? When does a heartbeat start? And all that type of stuff. And they said, well, it's a woman's body. But, I mean, yes, it's inside a woman's body, but it's a separate life. And so, you know, when it comes to killing children, in the feminism movement on that, one thing that has really surprised me that hasn't come out as an argument is, what about the baby girls that are getting murdered right now? Like, if you're supporting female rights, what about that?
So can I ask this? You guys mind? And I'll say I'm pro-life. And so does anybody mind sharing their position? I will. You know, saying, I mean,
I'm pro-life.
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 Choice.
Okay.
Sorry, but
no, it's okay. Remember,
No.
But I'm also a father of 5, so
yeah.
I'm also a father of 5. So my thing is, it's a woman's body. I help plant the seed. I help grow the seed. I help fertilize the seed. Seed is here. I'm help raising the seed. That's me. That's the women I decided to impregnate. We're all on the same page, but there was a time when we had to have that discussion. Getting closer to delivery, if complications go, what do you do? And I'm just like, I want to see the baby. But it wasn't my decision to make alone, so I had to decide with the mom. And so, thankfully, I didn't have any complications except for my one daughter's born
and I think,
face up.
But I think
she's
this,
nosy.
Okay, and let's go. And I think this does a lot because let's go back to this. And James, you can answer this for me that way on this, and everybody can, because what we do is whenever that we disagree with somebody, we always look for the exception, not the rule. Do you follow me in that? Because if you actually look at the majority of women say, well, when you say just abortion, what they do is they run to the exceptions right away. Rape. I can honestly tell you, and I'll tell you just as a guy, if somebody raped your daughter or raped your wife and you got pregnant that way, that's got to be a decision I wouldn't even want anybody to have to make, because I can honestly say, I don't know what I choose. Do you see what I'm saying? And see, and that's an extreme exception. But see, what they do is we have to always talk about the rules, just in general, like the rules. The majority of women, they ask to stay home. Okay, if you want to debate the exceptions, let's debate them. But in rules, can't we just say in general, this is because society can set down some general rules. Do you know what I'm saying? And that's where I said we can all be under the same law that way and stuff like that. But now what I can do is this. But here's what happens: this. You ever think of it this way? Watch the people who get the most emotional. Who is it, men or women? So all I have to do is, if I'm a man, that's why I watch politicians do this all the time. All they have to do is create an emotional argument. And see, that's what I'm saying. But if you get rid of the exceptions, which creates emotion, and talk about the rules, everybody has very calm, collective decisions and can come to an agreement on the majority of things. Even us, we can have different, and we all come from different backgrounds and stuff, and different educations and things like that. Brent, what you got?
Sorry. So when it comes to the abortion issue too, the other way I like to engage in this, and it plays off the emotional thing, is, okay, if we are going to be a pro-choice society where the woman gets to choose whether or not to deliver the baby, shouldn't fathers have a choice as well? And not with the baby, but if you can, without the father's permission, abort the baby, why can't the father abort fatherhood? Meaning
Right.
no child support, no being in their life at all.
Sure.
And when I've said that to some people, they're like, well, you're a terrible person. Why would you ever allow that to happen? And so I think it's, that's more of an emotional argument, I think.
There you go.
Yeah.
The emotional. But see, here's what happens. This. But you gave the emotional part of the other side.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see what I'm saying? Because the majority of men that even if they weren't with that woman would still want something to do with their child. Do you see what I'm saying? And wouldn't want the woman to get the abortion that way. And there's exceptions to the rules and stuff like that. But the idea is this, and it creates so much emotion. But it's all emotional. That's why you ever watch it in politics. You see a lot of politicians. That's why I'll never become a politician. I'll stay on the outside and fight them like we do and stuff. Is the fact that this is publicly they create emotion behind closed doors. They're all sipping tea together. That we pay for.
Yeah.
Do you see what I'm saying? That's why I tell people. I've said this before. Republicans and Democrats, in my view, are both stupid.
Yeah.
They're both dumb. Do you know what I'm saying? And it's like, and that's why we fight constitutionally for everybody's rights and stuff like that under the law. You know what I'm saying? So, but yeah. So let's go back to this. So Jamie, so you understood where I made the statement from, okay? And so when I look at that, and like I said, because here's what happens. Because if you do go back in history, because for you guys that don't know me in depth that way, I'm a big history buff. I am obsessed with history because I like to dig, just like I like the meaning of words and things like that and where they came from. Because I think, and you as an English teacher for a long time before being a journalist and everything, is the fact that this is people's vocabularies have become so short nowadays. They have. And it's like, and they don't articulate what they would do. They don't use words of, and that's why, like I tell people, the difference between, confidence and arrogance is competence. Do you see what I'm saying? And people are like, what does competence even mean? Do you see what I'm saying? No, you think I'm saying?
Oh, yeah. I understand.
Because if you're competent, here, watch, would you consider yourself a very competent lawyer? I'll answer for a yes. You know what I'm saying? But the idea is this. And so if you came along and said, I'm a great lawyer, you need me. If you didn't understand that male trait and I want a confident lawyer walking into these cases, they'd call that arrogance. Do you see what I'm saying? It's funny how a confident male is looked as arrogant, but when he's very competent, why is it arrogance? Do you follow me in that?
Yep.
See, so let's go back to this. So sorry, I was pulling up the teachings that I do when it comes to different characteristics. So here's a question, and this is going to be quite controversial. Are we equal?
No, that's the point.
Yeah.
Are men and women equal? Like 100% equal? No.
In dignity,
Do we have
of course.
equality under the law? We
That-
should.
yes.
But when you're talking about just abilities, no. And I think the clearest thing is when you look at the female athletes and then you have a guy say, you know what, I'm a girl, and they go from 500 or whatever place in the male league to winning the championship in the female league.
Ross, you got something there? I can see you shaking.
No, it's just sad, right? Because we're seeing it on display.
Yeah.
Right.
We're
Yeah.
seeing the
Blatantly.
differences played out in this whole transgender movement in athletes. Whether it's in was it an MMA?
No, yeah.
Where brutal things were happening.
busted her face up.
Busting
Yeah.
her
Yeah.
face up. We're seeing it in swimming. We're seeing it in track. We're seeing it in wrestling. We're seeing it in, we're seeing it on display. And this is where I sit here and I love everything that we're talking about. And I wish that America, we say, well, wake up, wake up. We're seeing this played out for us right in front of our face.
Well, and that's where I'm coming back to this.
And no issues.
Well, but this way I come back to this is like, and Brent, we discuss this a lot. It's like if all the men got up and said, no comply, this wouldn't be a problem. Do you understand? That's why I said we become minority tyranny now. Towards, for example, is because once again they've created catchphrases, toxic masculinity, things like this, and people shut down because they're more distracted instead of learning. And see,
Right.
and so that's the standpoint about going. We've taken it away from people because here's what happens. This is, and if we can downplay man's role, then guess what happens is then they're not going to go out and fight. They're going to watch Packers.
Right.
It would be nice to see
Yeah.
the tables turned where men would stand up in their masculinity and rewrite the narrative.
Amen.
Yes.
Yeah.
They're going to come up and we can sit here and argue on the semantics. What is it? The feminization of America. But yet there's so many wonderful things about feminine
Right, we have to
quality
stop-
that
yeah.
we love, right? We can say toxic masculinity and we think that we're assaulting. No, they're just identifying the broken behavioral patterns in these things. And we sit here and we war over this, but how about we just step up in our masculinity?
That's what men need to do, is
Self-regulated,
they need to step
self-regulated, self-controlled, yes, with a little piss and vinegar, with a gur back at us, and actually rewrite the narrative and take away the power of them to be able to come up with said statement of toxic masculinity. Or, we can sit here and argue, does trauma exist? Yes. Has it become a license and an excuse for people to not grow and better themselves? Absolutely. Which, therefore, we have a man who's not stepping up in his masculinity.
His
He's
role.
going to be defined by his past, his history, and he's defined by excuses and past traumas. So this whole thing, everything is upside freaking down.
It's like a contest of who can be the most victimized.
But that's what they want, though,
Exactly.
because if you're a victim, then you're what? You're
Controllable.
dependent.
Controllable, yeah, exactly.
And that's all this is across the board. Comes down to two words: power and control. That's all it is.
Yeah, but do you know how you can actually not worry about all this? It's not a joke. Get rid of government and money. Now, I mean not have government. I'm saying get rid of government and their money. Because here's what
yeah.
happens this. If you're looking, because you have to create, like you said, you have to create division. And then what happens, and you have to create crisis. For example, it's like, do you know that every 10 years there's some crisis, and that's why there's always some bug that's going to try to kill you, and they take their money, and then guess what happens this, and then once you can, and then when you can distract men, and you think I'm joking, it's really interesting, and Brent, we're going to, a lot of people don't know this about our history that way, but literally, I saw the lies of the pandemic coming because I've been fighting against the medical field for 30 years. And all this propaganda, they've tried to do this so many times. That's why it's a history of even look at it this way. Remember, it was only the 80s we're going to have a freeze. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And then ozone was going to kill us and all some of this. But here's what happens this. Because now the government can divert funds to these advocacy groups and things like that, which then here's what happens like this. Like, here, why would we give money to WHO? When would you vote for the president of the WHO? Or the FBI or things you follow me in that? They don't deserve, but you get rid of all that money away from that way, they have no power. They have no power. But you take money from men, they become your slave. Because you know why? How many men have you heard this happen? Well, I had to get the shot, otherwise I would have lost my job.
Yep.
Brent, how many times did you hear that?
A lot.
You know what's really funny? You know one of the most disgusting things that Brent and I talked about is people would come to me and say, Doc, help. Doc, help. And I spent a ton of my own personal money, help. So I stood up when everybody bowed down. But I did it with my own money. But the idea is this, I would say, okay. And I talk to men. I try to say, here, call Brent. Do you know that they didn't want to part with their money to pay him to fight? Remember that?
Yeah, and
How
I
many
can only do
times?
so many cases pro bono because
You got to feed your family.
Yeah.
and pay my employees.
That's the point.
Yeah.
But see, that's the point, though. But see, that's why I talk about when you look at any crisis, watch where the money goes. But here's what happens this. That's why government should not have money. Government had the money to survive and provide the 5 things that they're supposed to do from the federal government and other things. But the idea is and that's why when I hear, I'm sorry, like I said, because I think both political parties are stupid. Heck, I just gave money to a Democrat, RFK. Okay, and I'm going to give money to Trump or DeSantis or whoever is going to run on that side that way. But the idea is when you actually create those crises, they use their money and direct it, and then what they do is they have a level of control, and then what it ends up setting do is sets up the man to lose, because if you want to tell the government to piss off, you better have money. You better have it. Do you see what I'm saying? But if I can distract you and actually absorb your time so you're not training your kids up, taking care of your mind, muscle, and money, guess what happens? I know it's really funny. I just don't waste any minute a day. And that's difficult for men to hear. It's like they'll say, well, I need to take a break. What, from the life you created or want to create?
Yeah.
People say I need to recharge my batteries. For what? For the life that you created and want to run away from? Create a different life. You have the opportunity to do it that way. And it's like, but you're going to leave some people behind. I'm like, that's okay. Not everybody's supposed to participate in the game. There's no participation trophies when it comes to life. So that's
Well,
why, yeah.
And on that too, I think there were 2, maybe 3 law firms in Wisconsin that actually stood up for, less government control during the pandemic. And I remember having conversations with my business partner, and should we do this? What happens? Because cancel culture exists. And,
Absolutely.
And my response every time was, if they cancel me, I'll just go start something else.
Yep.
And I think a lot of men are, people in general, but specifically men, are very comfortable being where they are versus improvement.
Would we
Yes,
say they're
there's-
comfortable in mediocrity?
Yes. Yep.
I mean, just call a spade a spade.
Yeah.
But
There's
here,
there's
comfort
comfort
but
there.
imagine this
mediocre.
though. So imagine this. It wraps around to where we started. And we're going to start with Jamie. See where the term toxic masculinity come in. Because I have no problem walking up to a man saying, you're a piece of shit. See, and if women died in that society, they consider that toxic. But let me see a question. Do you know any men that are pieces of shit? Mm-hmm. So why is speaking brutal truth today so wrong?
It's been conditioned.
Everybody says, I want the truth. No, you don't.
Yep.
Because when I tell you the truth, you don't want to hear it. You saying? You don't want to hear it. But no, I just want you to be truthful. No, you don't. You don't at all. Women just say, I want a
long
guy
as
who
you're
tells me the
nice.
truth. yeah, as long as you're nice. See, now all the parameters come out that way. Because then they got to create, well, you're down, no. Because maybe, here's what happens this. Everyone, you guys, I know everybody personally except for James that way. But let me just ask you a question, James. Have you ever disciplined your kids?
Absolutely.
That's my point. And they're not going to think you're nice.
right.
We've just allowed those kids that didn't get disciplined when they're 6 to be now 26. Do you see what I'm saying? And see, that's the point. And so then I come along being more of the masculine alpha. Yeah, and I will be more like an Andrew Tate going, you're just a moron. And you don't like the way I speak about it that way. But I can also articulate it quite well, too, when I teach and do things that way, too. But sometimes, guess what happens? Even articulating some well, unless somebody feels bad about something they've done, where's the change going to come?
It's not.
So there you can't. So women are always going to be more encouraging. Do you see what I'm saying? Why can't we look at kids in their sports and say, you just sucked today?
I tell my kid. I
Yeah.
was like, you didn't earn it.
Yeah.
Right.
Gotta do better.
But see, that's where we talk about some of the incongruencies come in. It's like going, listen, it's straight across the board. But see, that's the thing. And if you look at those states of society and trying to build a society, there needs to be aggression. There needs to be a thing, because you know why? Because I said it's quite simple. If a man thinks he's better than he is, so let's go back to this. If a man thinks he's better than he is, society would teach him very quickly.
Yeah.
Because he has to create value to actually even be in sight. And the men that create the most value end up with the most money and women and everything like that. Because sorry, women, you're more attracted to the guy that's more like Andrew Tate than the fucking brokey who makes no money. Sorry. And a lot of men don't want to hear that, but good luck. You saying? I would tell people, you don't have to even be good looking as a man, and you get your mind, muscle, money together, and women are throwing it at you like frisbees.
Yep.
And then you're gonna demonize a man.
Yep.
That's the point. See, we need to have these discussions with women going, and it's like women go, yeah, kind of, because see, women see that mind, muscle, money, they go, hey, now that feminine security, protection, everything's gonna be okay. But see, what happens is we have to stop demonizing that thought process of it and going that way, because I have no problem. But then here's what happens, and this is where I differ. And yes, you can, and I can say I could change this, but I'm not always going to change it. Women, you want to enter the work world, but you want us to talk like women. But society isn't woman-dominated. It's becoming woman-dominated. How's it all working out? You know what I'm saying? We're letting women say, yeah, if you want. Do you understand? I watched Pierce Morgan, this ridiculous woman, and the only reason she's on TV because she was good looking, because she was dumb as a box of rocks. And sorry, beautiful women get more advantages than ugly women. Why can't we just say that's true? You saying? And this one guy, and she was sitting there trying to argue that it was okay for a 12-year-old. She called him a child. Sorry, see, that's the thing. We're letting kids become babies way too long. Make cat noises during school
Oh
because
my
she
gosh.
identifies as a
Furry.
furry. And so they're and being disrupted to the class, and she
Spayed
was
and
saying
neutered.
it's
Spayed
just
and
that a
neutered 'em.
12-year-old has imagination. My 12-year-old would get her ass whooped.
I was like,
Yeah,
that
so
parent
would
should be in
mine.
jail.
But here's the opposite. This. But why can't you say you're just a dumb individual? You are stupid. You are bad for society. You can't tell it to somebody. What if they killed themselves? Society's better. That's hard for everybody too. Because
Survival
I
of
know it's
the
really funny.
fittest.
Watch this. I've always said this. Who have ever seen the movie Few Good Men? Who's the bad guy in the movie? Tom Cruise. Tom Cruise, they think he's a hero. Jack Nicholas is the hero. Because you know as well as military, guy couldn't keep up. He goes, yet drastic his life, is gone, but it may have saved millions of lives. Do you see what I'm saying? It sounds bitter. It sounds aggressive. It sounds horrible. It sounds demeaning. All those are feminine home words. Mm-hmm. You know saying? That's great for a home. It's not great for society. Mm-hmm. So we have to look at people and say, you're just a fucking dumbass. You see, you all laugh, but then you're also complaining that it's turned upside down because all the good people won't tell people they're the fucking dumbass. See, that's the serious stuff that way. I'm willing to say, you're a fucking dumbass. You know what I'm saying? And I actually can prove, I can stand here competently saying, I took my money and put it where my mouth was, and I hired lawyers, and I went out and fought where everybody sat around and watched the Packers. Mm-hmm. And they were more concerned about when do we get back in the Packer game so we can all waste hours of our life that mean nothing to your life instead of doing something good for society. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I hired a real man in Brent. It did. And we fought, didn't we?
For a
now,
long
when
time,
I mean by fight, we weren't out there punching people.
Wanted to.
Yeah, I mean,
What's that?
that's what I mean.
we were doing everything by the legality of the law. Do you see what I'm saying? And looks like we're gonna have to do it. I text you the other day. Mm-hmm. I'm like, well, Brent, you ready for a fight? He's like, and I could tell I got his testosterone going. I'm like, look what's happening. Let's get going. Mm. But see, so here's what happens. This, I don't want to go into battle with somebody that's be calm, be relaxed. Mm-hmm. It's okay. No, it's not okay. It's not okay. So,
well, and on that too, one thing that concerns me is with how society has changed, even in the last couple of years. We're fortunate that we had arguments that worked in court.
Yep.
But quite frankly, if we've watched what's happened to our justice system in the last few years,
yep.
What happens when you have a judge up there that says, you lose,
yep.
Right? And I think a lot of people will be disheartened and stopped, and that terrifies me because if you lose in one spot, you got to find a way to fight the other way. So
what I'm concerned with, and everybody can give me an opinion on this, and this is going to seem weird coming from me on this, because I'd be one of the first to go in this battle, but I'm concerned about that. Do you know why? Because the only thing now, remember, there's a reason why there's certain amendments. See, the First Amendment is so important for everybody to never give up, because you take it away, you only have the Second Amendment next, which is what?
Yep. Guns,
gun
violence.
control, yeah.
And I will tell you this, I have no problem if I had to go to violence, if I was called to. Do you see what I'm saying? Because you know why? It's like, because here's what happens this. So let's say now the justice, we see it right now. We see it right now happen that way. And eventually what you're going to do is everybody will get fed up enough, and then there is going to be a battle. It's just showing the history that way. That what happens is when we rely on the law, which has been good so far, you know, saying yes, we see some corruption that way, but those are exceptions, not the rule. The majority is the rule. Is the law still works quite well, and stuff like that. But the idea is this: but that when it becomes the tipping point, when there's more corruption, then guess what happened? There will be a pushing point. And
I think this is where strong men are going to start standing up, though, because of what's happening. Like whether we see this or not, I think this is the time period where we're going to get tested, where we're now depending on the next generation of strong people. Because the ones sitting at this table, and James, I don't know you, we did the battle.
We did.
In the beginning when it was so hard, not legally, but you legally. But I think this next generation of people, like, y'all got to stand up. Like, y'all got to get in the fight, because if we lose this battle, we're losing the freedom of our country. 2.5 years later, they're doing this again. 2.5 years later. Right. Like, didn't we just...
It's because they
have
know
all
they
these
can.
studies?
Yeah.
They are that high on themselves.
Yep. Well, the one thing is interesting, because I have a massive following in Australia. Hi, Australia. But the idea is this, because before what happened over the last 3 years, all these countries would brag about that they have freedom.
Yeah.
I'm like, Australia, how'd that do for you?
Yeah.
England, how'd that do for you? At least the United States had quasi freedom. Do you know what I'm saying? If United States tumbles on their freedom, we're done. Then, because remember, the free world ends. It really does, and stuff like that. Because at least we still had enough. Do you see what I'm saying? Because the FBI showing up at my house or the police showing up here this way, I had no problem calling Brent or an attorneys and saying, hey, listen, it's like I always tell people, there's a difference between being arrested and being convicted. Do you see what I'm saying? They can arrest you for anything.
Yep.
Convicted is a whole nother thing. Do you understand? And it's like, and so that's why the interesting part is going forward. It's like, what do we do? But see, that's why that's why it's really funny. And James, you brought this up, and I want to talk about this because I'm willing to talk about everything. And I want to talk about race for a second. Okay. Do you know what's really funny? I have really good friends that are wealthy like me that are African American. Do you understand that race never comes up? Do you understand?
Yeah.
When you're moving forward, would they create the racial divide? But you put two rich men that are black and white in the room, race never comes up. Do you know why? Because we have nothing to fight about. We're actually trying to work together and build together that way.
It's a made-up problem.
It's a made-up problem. Do you understand?
Oh, yeah.
And people say, well, Doc, you're saying there's no racist? No, I know some racist people. I do. So the concept that racism doesn't exist, that's just stupid. But see, what they want to do is they want to act like it's either one extreme or another. It's either we're all racist or we're all not. Actually, it's not true. There's people that are very racist and stuff like that. But on the flip side, but if you bring up society and stuff like that, all the cultural differences go away very quickly. What's your opinion on that?
I can agree with that because I didn't share this earlier, but I work customer service for auto insurance, home insurance. And so my voice doesn't sound like my face. And so I get to hear a lot of the pushback from the customers. And there's some racial bias in that pushback. And then the other thing that I do when I'm not at work is I do stand-up comedy in the area. And so, again, my voice does not match my face. My name is shortened version of my full name. And so when I get around these people and we're doing shows and stuff, and I get up there and I do what I do, we're all the same. Mm-hmm. We're all the same. And race comes up because we joke about the absurdities of race. We joke of the absurdities of stereotypes. Mm-hmm. We joke on like all this racial bias because I know for a fact that when I go somewhere and if it's a 99% white audience, I'm automatically funnier just because I'm the black guy with the rest of the white guys. I'm automatically funnier, and I can get up there and just say hello. And I've gotten laughed just by saying hello and just stood there.
Thank you. I'll be here all night.
Yeah, exactly. So, and I've hung out with millionaires, and not one of them cared about me.
Thank you.
Not one of them cared about me. In fact, they came and we talked just like this. In fact, they were frying turkeys. We were up in Peshtigo, and it was like, hey, you got to try this one. Hey, what are you drinking? Hey. And it wasn't, now I'm very keen on if I'm being placated because I'm there. I'm keen on that. It wasn't that. It was genuine.
Yep.
They're like, oh, you part of the group.
Yep.
Let's get down. Let's drink. Let's eat. What do you do? Oh, okay. Well, this is what we do. And okay. And it was like, nothing mattered.
Right.
Except for that moment.
Yep. Yep. And that's the discussions. That's the thing. And why can't we all sit across from the table and talk about this shit? Do you see? It's like we're taught, like I said, don't talk about religion, don't talk politics, don't talk race, don't talk things like this. It's like why? How are your kids supposed to learn about this? How are you supposed to learn about this way? And it's like, and that's the thing that I think is, once again, they've created these things to actually keep us from talking about things.
Yep.
And keep us from it that way, because if we can distract you and divide you and create problems between things, and then and what they do is, and here, watch this. In general, I know it's quite funny, and they have to create some problem that's going to affect us all, and so that because they got to divert what funds. You know what I'm saying? Because it's really funny. We actually do some business now in India, and so it was kind of cool. And I was on the phone with somebody, and I asked them a question, because they come from a very poor country and things like that. And I said, what do you guys think about global warming? I want to know their opinion and stuff like that. And do you know what the person said to me?
What's global
What was
warming?
global warming?
What's that?
They didn't know what it was.
No.
What?
They said the majority of people here can't even survive and get food. Do you really think
care.
they're worried
Caring
about?
about global.
And see, when life becomes too good, especially, and I know this sounds really weird, I'm be very called a misogynist for this, but also the Christian community does this big time. When life becomes too good, women, over-spiritualized people, they make up problems that are not there because they have to have something to bitch about.
Yes. The brain will always search for problems. It's very,
Always search.
very, very dangerous in this comfort crisis that we are in.
I see it all the time. I'm like going, because it's like, that's what I said, sometimes in this country, we don't realize how good we have it. Mm-hmm. When you go to a different foreign country and you've went on mission trips and things like that, I talk to people, I'm sitting there going, there's people that don't have fucking food, and you're yelling about this stuff? There's people that still dying in different foreign countries that don't have clean water, and you didn't get your Big Mac the way you're supposed to, and you're freaking out? You need some real problems in life in order to do it that way.
Yes.
I watch women that have it financially made, and see, as I said, I call it Leonardo DiCaprio principle, because as he flies around on his private jet, and I'm all for private jets. I take them all the time. Okay, but the idea is this. But I don't care about global warming either. But here's the point. And it's like, and then he does this. When you've hit the peak of your career, you lose purpose. You have to run for something. So you got to create a problem so you feel like you have some purpose.
Yeah.
That happens a lot when you see this a lot when people have no purpose. They have to run because they have to feel important.
Yeah.
And I'm like going, what's more important than the people around you? Why don't you invest into them? Why don't you I love this. I mean, I find this quite hilarious. It's like, I love when I still believe in churches, even though I don't go in anymore, but I still believe and me and Ross have the same agreement on this massively. It's like, well, no, we don't
it alters.
Yeah,
I
we
mean,
alters.
yeah,
But the idea is this, what I mean is this,
Not saying.
I believe that the church and the community could be a wonderful, great thing. But when's the last time you really had a church really invest in their community and not be ran like a business?
Yep.
Sorry. You know what I'm saying? I haven't seen it. And yes, and I know Jamie said this to me because Jamie and I were texting back and forth one day because I was like going, show pastors this. And she says, Greg Locke, he's in California. You talk about the exception, not the
Tennessee.
what? Tennessee. Which I love him. But you're talking about the what? Exception, not the rule. She didn't say, oh, the church down the road
But
from here in Green Bay.
that is society, what's happened to churches. While I agree with your stance on how the church is, but I think that was all design as well because of all these pastors getting pushed through the school that they have to seminary
Right.
to like train them, just like our kids are going through public education. Do you think Jesus would come back and be part of the churches right now? No.
I think Paul will be writing a letter.
But what is going to happen is there's going to be a revival of people that are doing the book of Acts. And it's going to shock a lot of people, and I've seen it firsthand, and I've done it firsthand. So you can act like that, but I've seen personal revival happening. But I also know that stuff's going to happen to these weak churches. They have on purpose, because the enemy has gotten in, whether you guys like it or not, and softened the church.
Well,
has softened
can I add some of that?
pastors.
Non-denominational churches are nothing more than woke churches. They're the wokeness of today in the church
100%.
because they dominate in women. They speak to women.
They're
They
personal
don't
development
train men.
speakers.
They don't train men at all. Do you understand? Because I know it's really funny. I said this and actually we finally have one pastor that agreed to come on here because most of them are too scared to come on here. They are. You understand? Because I want you to think of it this way. And I said to him, I'm like, listen, if I was to speak to all the men, I'd get up and say, hey, how many guys are broke? And your wife, or don't wives, raise your hand if you're financially struggling and you're stressed out and stuff like this. And I'm like, and I'd say, and I said to him, he goes, well, a bunch of my congregation members would, the wives raise their hand. I say, then men, get out of here. Sitting here listening for a message of hope.
Yeah.
Instead of getting your butt out there and providing for your family, you're not doing God's work. You're sitting here waiting for somebody else
The
to lay it
church
down.
is supposed to equip. It's
supposed to
it's
be equipped.
Equip, and it's not
Thank
by
you.
design.
By design, you're right, and I agree with you. And see, that's why when we talk about feminism and everything, it was set up to. If you look at now, watch this. This is history. This history. Go back to the AMA. Go back to schools. Go back to. Do you understand? Before the Rothschilds, do you understand the majority of people were entrepreneurs? And this is basic history. And he donated money to schools and stuff, and got people to come. Do you know something? They've programmed people. Get a good job. Plan for retirement. Go away. You know what that is? It's modern day slavery.
Yeah.
100%.
Yes.
I won't do that. I would tell my employee, if you come here and want to get a 3% raise every single year and do this way, you're going to make me extremely wealthy, but you're going to make me wealthy, and you will work and be the slave for me this time. And I won't do that. I don't run the company that way. Do you see? That's why when I fired all the people last year and got rid of people, I said, IRA's gone, all stuff of this. And I'm teaching my employees how to be wealthy while still enjoying their career.
But I think that's another thing that men haven't trained their kids on is how to create wealth,
Yep.
generational wealth.
Yep.
Because like you are doing a good job. Is like you're creating this money
Community.
system,
Community.
but you're also teaching them
Yep.
wealth.
Right.
Right. You invest in property, and then you put a house on it, and then you rent it out. Like you want to not enslave the kids to a system. It's help them understand wealth.
Yep. Well, because when you have wealth, you can tell people to piss off.
Yeah.
It's really true. First time I ever heard this when Joe Rogan said, "I got fuck you money." Do you stand? I can tell you, fuck off. Do it all the time. It's really funny. It's like going, because why? Because I'm like, fuck off, Brent, sue him. Do you stand? It's not a joke. And it's really, and what happens is people more care about their dollar, about losing it, than actually investing it.
Yeah.
But if you can teach people that, it's like they're at the hamster on the wheel running around.
Yeah.
Right.
And stuff. And so, but here's what happens this. Now, let me ask you a question. Is there anybody in your family, friend network, that discussions that we had tonight, that they should be sitting here talking about things like this? see, that, but that we come with pushback, but it needs to be. Because then you can find out who you're going to battle with, who you're living life with, who you're going to do things that way. Because there's some people in your life that shouldn't be there because you won't say something because you're worried about conflict with them.
Yeah.
And you need to say, no, I disagree with you. You're wrong. Yeah. Because we're so worried. We've been taught that if we offend somebody or have conflict, it's wrong. Yeah, it's really funny. I ask this all the time. Jamie, do you like do you like conflict, or do you avoid conflict?
I like healthy conflict.
Oh my goodness. I'm gonna slap you.
No, you ain't.
Figuratively speaking. Okay.
Yeah, I like conflict.
Okay. Aaron. I'm not gonna ask Ross and Dana because they know where I'm going with this.
I know where you're going
You know
with
too, 'cause
this.
James.
Actually, it kind of depends.
Brent.
I love conflict.
Yeah. Well, and see what you do for a living though. But here's what happens, James. I can tell you this just from getting to know you that way. I guarantee you love conflict. But see, people think they don't until I say this. Every one of you guys, if I met your kids, I guarantee you love conflict.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
No, because you know why? Because here's what happens, Jamie. I know your kids. You know what I'm saying? They're gonna be incredible young ladies. They already are. They're gonna be incredible young women. But I want you to think about it this way. Why? Because you just let them do what they wanted.
Yeah.
That's the that
See,
makes
you
sense.
love conflict if you can control the outcome.
Control the outcome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
See, I want people to say, listen, love conflict, but you can't control the outcome.
I love
Yeah.
conflict. It's a beautiful thing, and I walk with my girls, and I always like to have these conversations. I was like, you need to have conflict, and I think sometimes this trauma based conflict is just this aggressive to like talk over someone. But I think it's such an awesome thing to be like, hey, I didn't agree with what you said, or yada yada yada, and talking through a situation. It's a beautiful thing that unfolds. Do I have an expectation when I go into that conflict? No, but it's like, without saying it, but it's like man to man. Let's have a conflict.
But
let's
here,
be real.
What do you think those two words you can say to somebody that can start the conversation of conflict is?
I disagree.
See, that's the whole idea. Why can't we just look at somebody and say, I disagree with you? And it starts the dialogue that way. You understand? And you really think of it this way? Do you understand that here's what happens this? Is I can honestly tell you, I disagree with Bernie Sanders, but at least I like him enough because I know what he stands for.
Yeah.
So I just choose now. I just choose as a person not to do life with him.
Yeah.
It's the people that don't conflict, and you find out they lie to you later and stuff like that, and just saying the things they want you to say that way. And see, I'd rather have people say, and if you think this way, the conflict, if it's clarified, if it's talked about and discussed, guess what happens? And that's why it's kind of funny. If you look at politicians, I have no problem if there's both sides of the aisle and say, I disagree this way. But do you understand they can usually come to some conclusion?
Yeah.
That's it, is that so many times when you start having that conflict is equated with heightened emotions and not respectful discussion, or even simply just discussion. It is that 2-3-year-old temper tantrum. That's what we encounter outside of these walls, right? Conflict here, yeah, that's healthy, that's beneficial. But when we're looking at conflict with someone who's, the last 3 years, right, just going to throw a hissy fit and not be able to
Well, they'll
defend
use,
or articulate.
and what they'll do is they'll use terms. You're a misogynist. No, I can articulate. I think
Yeah.
women are too emotional to make the right decisions most of the time, so I'd rather have them not make a decision. Oh, wait, okay, what you disagree on?
Right.
Well, you're just a misogynist. See what they do? And because
Just,
so many people are so scared to be called misogynist, racist, all stuff of this, I'm like, what's your evidence? You know what I'm saying? If I hate women, then why am I married? Why am I just gay? Why don't I run towards the men? If I'm so into men, why don't I run towards men? Do you understand? Sorry, guys. There's no appeal that way. But we get my point, though. See, I said that's the whole idea, and that's why we have to train our. That's why I think I love talking to lawyers, because your best lawyers can articulate their ideas, and they have to do it, and they have to convince the jury. Do you see what I'm saying?
Well, and I think another reason why people two reasons people try to avoid conflict is, one, they care too much about what the other person thinks of them. Like, no offense, you can think I'm an asshole. It's probably true, but you get who you deserve. But the second thing is, it goes back to how we're raising children, and a lot of discipline's taken away, but it's conflict avoidance, right? We don't want to cause conflict or anything like that, and I disagree. And I think conflict is where you grow from.
Agree.
And you don't have to ever come to an agreement. There's people with the COVID masking stuff that refuse to speak with me. I don't really care. They've called me every name on the sun. I don't care. But at least they heard my position. And like you said, it lets you determine who you choose to spend your time with.
Yep.
So.
I actually just posted about this the other day. Well, I posted a while ago about how the biggest problem in our culture is made-up problems. And then followed it up with the second biggest problem is people like not standing up for, what they believe in, and how when we do that and someone conflicts with us, our answer should be like, hell yeah, I believe in that, you don't. And not, oh, I'm sorry, that was offensive, let me reword that.
And one
The
more thing,
constant
you
rewarding.
had talked with James about race and race issues and things like that, but what blew my mind is the Supreme Court case that did away with affirmative action and said Harvard couldn't be racist against Asians. But, in America, a lot of the race conversations are black and white, right? Those conversations need to be had, but, who is most upset that affirmative action went away? It was the universities, because they're getting paychecks from the government by taking in, but who's it harming?
Yep.
It was the Asian students that, hey, they're smarter.
So, should I tell you, if we want to talk about, people that have been come against and people that have been discriminated against more than any racial or minority group, do you know the biggest, in until the last 3 years, do you know that, because they were the smallest population of all populations in the world, do you know who the most discriminated people were in the world before COVID was? The unvaccinated. The biggest cult in the world is medicine. The biggest cult in the world is the vaccinated. They are the biggest cult in the world, because if I tried to have a conversation with anybody about how a vaccine works, they have no clue. They have zero clue. And they turn their stuff over to authority. They, by far, because if you were unvaccinated, it was almost like you were a person that was going to be a plague back. And so that you were discriminated before 3 years ago that way. Now it's like, now that's changed a little bit, because they go, oh my goodness, they've lied to you. Well, maybe they've lied to you about other things too. I've always said this. Think of it this way. So I got a question for you guys. How old were you when you realized that your parents didn't know everything? See, we all laugh about that, but how old were you when you realized your doctor didn't know everything?
Much older.
No, see, we have to ask those questions. Now let's have a discussion about it. Do you really think your doctor knows everything? Yeah. Then why are you sick and fat?
Why is the doctor sick and fat?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you understand?
Seriously.
Well, and what's scary, and I know you and I talked about this, but I heard from a pediatrician that has 30 plus years experience in the field.
We just talked about this.
Unvaccinated and homeschooled are considered red flags for child abuse. Yes. And so this is
I
something
just
I'm
talked
going
about
to
this on our
be exploring
show.
more. Yeah. It blew my mind. I was, what? And no joke, I'm dealing with an issue right now where CPS was called because there was a anonymous complaint. Well, it came from the doctor. Not it was a different doctor.
Yeah, it was a medical doctor. Trust me.
And said, I believe that you're abusing your child, and part of the red flags was they didn't believe in vaccinations. And so when I heard that, I was like, no way can this be a thing. And so when I was talking with Doc, I looked it up. There are so many papers and studies from like National Institute of Health on, dealing with child abuse, and unvaccination or non-vaccination is considered a red flag.
Right.
I still can't believe it, but
As a parent who had a vaccine injured, two vaccine injured children, and chose not to vaccinate and chose to do
You were
health differently,
discriminated against.
called negligent,
But see, the nice
ridiculed,
thing is,
pushed away, but
COVID changed
literally
Yeah.
they did.
Yeah.
But I will say that even then we chose to homeschool. I constantly was looking over my shoulder. I was knowing that at any moment somebody could have made a call.
And do you know why the FBA showed up at my house? Do you guys know the real reason why they showed up at my house? Because not only as I fight against COVID, but I said, listen, if you come to my house and try to force vaccinate me, I will shoot anybody that comes to my house that way. Because, let me ask you a question, and I want to ask you as a parent, regardless of what your beliefs or anything, if they showed up at your house to force them on your child that you didn't want, James, what would you do?
It wouldn't happen.
Do you get my point? And would you turn to force if need be?
Yep, absolutely.
See, we all would. But yet, because someone's offended about that, because you won't go along with what they think is right. Do you see what I'm saying? It's like this. I always love when people say they have a truth. So I had an argument with this person the other day. It was over spiritualized. I said, how many churches you been to? She's like, 10. I said, which one had the truth? Because they all taught 10 different things. Churches and immunology books are the same. Just made up bullshit for most of the stuff, trying to create an agenda of control. It is. It's like
Power and control.
Power and control.
2 words.
It really comes down to it, and
Shows
that's
up
why.
everywhere.
And that's why I tell people, if we get rid of our United States, even though with corruptions, I know it's really funny because it's easy to say this. Corruption is still the exception, not the rule, but we lose the freedoms that we are all trying to fight for. It's a bad day for the world.
Oh, yeah.
You say because Australia, England, I always love it. I always love those. I have always people like, we're just as free as everybody else.
No, you ain't.
So that's why round 2 coming. Do you see what I'm saying? And it's like, but here's what happens. Question is this, and I'm judged by this, which I think is awesome. Anyways, if they're not, when they're trying to do, there's good and bad in the world, and they, when they're doing evil, what are you guys going to do about it? Do you understand? I mean, sincerely, what are you going to do? That's the thing, because we all say, like, this world is turned upside down. I watch people say, I said, okay, my first answer, okay, what are you doing? Oh, wait, I saw your Facebook. You're watching Packer game. Distraction. Do you say? And the reason why I bring up the Packers, I don't care what it is that way. If you're participating and watching somebody else, the Romans, look at the history. Roman Colosseum was to distract the peasants of how bad their life was, to entertain them. Do you know what I'm saying? And it's like she said, television, the vision they want you to live, not what reality was really like, and stuff. So, yes. All right. Oh my goodness, our time went by so fast today. Sorry about 2 hours and 40 minutes.
Wow.
I know.
Yeah.
We go on for hours on this, but what we're going to do is this. So what I always like to do is give anybody their final thoughts. Make a statement, share your thoughts, share if you think about something differently or things that you enjoyed tonight. But Jamie, let's start with you. What you got for final thoughts?
My final thoughts is, the topics we talk about, I think, honestly, we're at this tipping point of this hard economy and what's going on. I know it in me. It will create strong men because society has created weak men. And in this system, I think that the strong men are going to come back. I think there's going to be, honestly, a shift, whether we can all agree to that or not. I think there's going to be a lot. I honestly think, and you can mark my words, we're going to go through a very, 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 very dark period in the next year. And if your faith isn't strong, you're going to be shook. If you don't have strong faith people in your life, you're going to be shook. You have to get your faith game strong because it's going to get wild.
Aaron?
I agree. I think it's time for strong men to stand up, but I think that means that women need to fall back into their femininity and let the strong man stand up. And I know that's gonna that'll get enough hate, but that does not mean that women aren't strong. They're just strong in a different, supportive way.
Ross?
Yeah, I'm definitely kind of with Aaron on this one. I'm all for things getting back to the rightful, more natural way of things. Men stepping into their what we would say is God-given attributes, right? In that masculinity, and for the woman to fully come alive in her femininity, I think it's going to be an interesting turn of events for women who have fallen in love with this masculine posture, this to be in control and to come under the protection and the safety. It's going to be an interesting power struggle, is what it's really going to come down to. I would like to think that it's going to be, all honky-dory, as they say, right? And just easy transitions. But I don't think so. Not until the men can, I think, just step into it, embrace it. I noticed the word you said, well, it's a no, you need to embrace it, be proud of it, and wield it properly. And yeah, I think it's going to be an interesting journey.
Dana.
I've kind of talked about it a couple times tonight, but I still just kind of stand by the whole feminism thing and the toxic masculinity. These are made up problems. We are too comfortable in our culture. There's a comfort crisis that's going on. We need to be actively putting ourselves through challenges daily so that we're not looking for all this made up crap. This body positivity stuff, like, that's a made up problem. Your neighbor mowing the lawn the wrong way is a made up problem, right? Like, we have too much time to look for this. And when your brain is bored, that's what it starts to do. It makes up problems. So we need to be putting our brains through more challenges. And when it comes to the masculinity and femininity piece, we need to understand that there needs to be polarity in the sexes, right? Like, your masculine man needs a feminine woman, and that's 80% of relationships. 10% of relationships, you're going to have the feminine man and the masculine woman, but there's still polarity there, right? You still have your complementary opposite. And then your other 10% are your balanced couples who are still fine, but they're just not all that passionate or anything like that. But well, that's
You're
true.
boring.
That is,
They're boring.
Those aren't the people who aren't going to have a passionate fight and then be going at it 10 minutes later.
What do you mean going at it?
Having sex.
There you go. Say it. There you go.
But anyway, we need to have that polarity between the masculine and the feminine, because we are getting, as women become more masculine and men become more feminine, you're getting depolarized and you're getting closer to center, and that's where all the passion is lost, and we can't let that happen.
James.
Well, I agree with most of everything that we said here, but the single thing that I agree with most is we do need to have these conversations. We absolutely do need to have these conversations. We need to, in our journey to find and recreate or restore how things used to be that really worked well, we need to have these dialogues. We need to be open to that. We need to be able to just look each other in the eye and be like, dude, you messed up. I've got a good core of friends that will sit me down and just stop me cold in my tracks, and they will be like, dude, you being a jerk for no reason. And childhood traumas and stuff like that, not a license for me. Because it's again, talk about it, put it out there, let that part go. Stop wearing it like an anchor.
There you go.
So
Like that.
Great.
Yeah.
Brent.
So I think it's been said here a few times, but tough times create strong men create good times create weak men create tough times, and it's a cycle. And it's easy to say, and I think it's very true. But, a lot of us had said, we think that there's going to be some really tough times coming up. In my mind, it immediately goes to violence because, you push people so far, they get violent. What concerns me is I think people, going back to television, see violence as, what they see on TV. Yeah, it might be gory, but, you shoot somebody, they're dead. That's not real life, and I think it will. So I actually really don't want violence coming to our country at all, because it is brutal, and it's not something I want my kids to experience. So I'm hoping it doesn't get there. I'm not 100% positive it won't, just because and my business partner will say I've said this to him many times. You know, I think America only has a couple years left before something changes. I've said that probably, I don't know, the last 6 years. So thankfully it hasn't come there yet. But I agree that we have become so divided as a country that, you know, when you have one group of people just saying, "Oh, you're a Republican, you're a Nazi." Well, no, I'm not. But where do you go from there? Like, you've already called people Nazis or whatever. I mean, there's not much room to go from there before violence comes. And I think we saw a taste of it in 2020. And I'm hopeful it doesn't get there. But, you know, without conversations like this where I can disagree with people and not be called a Nazi, you know, something like that, it's important to do. Or call me a Nazi. I don't care. I'm not. But, you know, I think it's important to have conversations to avoid the brutality of physical violence.
Right. And I think after all these conversations now, I'm hoping that from our podcasts and our discussions that way, discussions lead to learning. Learning has to lead to action. Because I'm hoping that, you know, the podcast was never meant to get clicks or entertainment or things like that. It's meant to say, listen, real topics, things that people don't want you to discuss, talk about them, and then have the ability to say, I learned something, but now I got to do some action. And maybe the action is just go say sorry to somebody that you should have said sorry to, so there's peace. Maybe there is, it steps into your role and your family gets better. Maybe is you tell the person wearing a mask, you are a moron. Do you understand? Because if I don't tell them moron, there'll be more morons, and then I don't get my choice. They'll force stuff into me. See, that's the thing. That's the whole idea, because I'm a big action person. I'm a big action person, because for us to accomplish anything good, it takes action. And if we can keep you fighting, that's not a good action. Do you understand? We got to move things forward. So thank you for being on. And then for all you guys watching right now, if you want to be on, please do me a favor. Send an email or reach to Erin at outreach@thewellnessway.com.
Yes.
And
please.
stuff. We've had lots of women. We need more men. James, thanks for being the man. Yeah, how'd you hear about this?
Eric Ash.
Eric, yes.
Yeah.
Eric, talk about a good man right
Shout
there.
out to Eric.
Eric, it's fantastic. Good, that's right. Well, thank you for being on. Brent, thank you for being on. Jamie, thank you for being on. Aaron, thank you for being on. Ross and Danny, you guys are awesome. It's fantastic doing life with you. Fantastic doing life with you all the time. I've done life with you for a long time and stuff like that. And so,
Ross, are you ready
And I
to
still
do?
disagree with you.
that's, yeah. And guess what happens? And we're still close, and we always get closer. And,
And
we just,
definitely disagree with you. To think that
But you
might
better
have
buckle up for the rest of your life.
Why?
I'm moving into your office pretty soon. Remember, that's still a thing. We're gonna find you a wife. It's gonna be great. We have so many fun times ahead.
Here's the thing: you are too close to this guy, because you are even more delusional now than when I first
I'm
met
a
you.
woman. What do you want?
wow.
We can save this for the end.
Okay, you're a woman. That's why you have no say. Because based on emotion and delusion, you don't get to pick. So therefore, you
Wait, I may have to go. I may have to go on this side.
That is a fair argument.
Ross got me on my own words right there. I'm going
Fair
back
argument.
there.
I am. See, I pay attention to details.
I will just start to find the women. I will
Nope.
choose them.
Nope.
Yep.
Jamie, it's awesome having you back.
Thank you.
Be back more.
Pigs must have flown.
That's right. That's right. Yep. That's
Vikings
right.
are going to win the Super Bowl.
It's been Brent. I can't. Just a special thank you. I can't say enough greatness about you. Not only the fact that you're an incredible lawyer. We fought a lot over the last 3 years. Not you and I fought together a lot over the last 3 years. We did it legally. We did it. He said he's a lawyer. And I'm very proud of this. I want people to know is everything I do is self-funded. You know, I made my money very ethically. I am one of those rich guys. Do you say I started out with zero? Started with $500 that my mom borrowed me, and we built a massive company doing stuff. But what I did with my money, and Jamie, you were part of that. Remember, we invested into lawyers and supported politicians that were stood up for freedom. And but the fight wasn't easy. You know what I'm saying? Reputations, kickbacks, and when we get kickbacks is from people, you know, threatening us, lives, things like that. My family got death threats and things, and but see, that's the thing. It's like, but all that put aside, you know, we did a lot of fighting, and maybe we got to fight in the future. You know what I'm saying? I'm hoping we don't have to. I'm hoping that that people are there, but I can't thank you enough. And but guess what happens? If we got to fight, guess what happens? I'm just gonna take my money, and that said, I'm very proud of this. I've taken my own hard-earned personal money. I got no government money. I've gotten zero government money in all my career. I've never been helped by the government. It's always been, I went out, I offered a good service, we built up good stuff. I took my money in real estate and other good investments that turned out really well, but that allowed me, I believe that God's blessed me so I can fight for people's freedoms too. And we'll continue to do it if we need to. We'd have to, but I will. But so I can't thank you enough. So I heard that you were beyond. I heard from these guys you're beyond. I'm like, Brent's beyond. That's awesome. So, and to do me a favor, this is not a promotion, but I'm sorry. We fought for freedom like crazy. Tell people how they can get a hold of your law firm.
So website is www.leattys.com. Marketing thing for everybody. If you're using initials and the abbreviation for attorneys, make sure you write it down because it looks like Leattys versus LE attorneys, which we had planned for. So,
Nice.
But that's how you get to us. Yeah.
Good.
Nice.
I said, and we won every case. That was the good part. And he'd call me up and tell me the most disgusting stories. And he's like, and I'm proud of this, but I want people to know this truly because sometimes people misconceive what I'm doing. Is, did I ever turn you down once for somebody that needed help?
Nope.
Wisconsin residents were begging for help. I didn't know these people. I even told him to keep it anonymous where it came from. Because you know some of this? There's only one thing I fear in this world, and that's God Almighty. I don't give a shit about what anybody else says. I don't give a shit about what anybody says whatsoever, because when you care about other people's opinion, you're their prisoner. But I do fear God. I don't want him to take away all the great stuff he's given me. So on that being said, I appreciate all you guys for being here. You guys are all welcome back. If you do have friends that want to be here, come tell them, and so you guys know it's a very welcoming thing. You're allowed to say and do what you want in here. That's the cool thing is. But now you guys said enough fuck words today.
Not me.
Yes. And so that's okay. I said that's the fun part about it, though. So, and you don't have to, don't want to. So, Joshua, thank you for always making the show beautiful and stuff like that. And thank you for our team, including Eric. That makes we have an incredible team that does wonderful things here, that do stuff. And thanks for my family a lot. And thanks for everybody that's involved. And thanks to my two good friends here. You know, doing life with you guys, doing on a regular basis. So, and we'll see you guys next week.